Hey, hi guys, this is Girish here.
Uh, Hi Girish, welcome to the session. Please give us like 5 minutes time. We'll be there. We'll
Yeah,
start
sure.
soon. Thank you.
And Menaka, will I be sharing the screen and controlling the presentation, or how will that
Yes,
be?
absolutely, absolutely. You
Okay,
can share the screen. Yes.
okay, got it. Thank you.
So yeah, our team will join us soon.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Product Leadership Festival 2020 Data Edition. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Before we start our first session of the evening, allow me to introduce our host of the evening, Mr. Sai Satish Vedam. Sai is a senior faculty and an executive coach at Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Director of Product Management at Oracle. Welcome, Sai. It's lovely to have you today.
Thank you, Sonal. Good evening, all of you, and welcome to the fourth day of Product Leadership Festival Data Edition. I am excited to be back here, and I'm sure folks will stream in as we get going. We have power-packed 3 keynote sessions today, which is unique. I think before I introduce our guest speaker today, I'd like to take a few moments to brief you about the Product Leadership Festival and also the organization that is hosting this, right? So Product Leadership Festival 2020 Data Edition is hosted by Institute of Product Leadership. For those of you who are not familiar with IPL, IPL as an organization started in 2012 with a singular goal and purpose of creating 10,000 product leaders in this country. Institute designs and delivers programs to help senior working professionals, especially technology managers, in help them transition into product leadership roles. The organization works with various universities and corporates in offering and designing and delivering these programs. So Product Leadership Festival is the first virtual conference. In fact, there is an annual conference that happens every year in different cities in a large hotel context, and where we bring in executives, industry leaders, thought leaders to give some actionable insights to the participants. But given the current situation around COVID and the pandemic, the whole conference is moved online. And with the overwhelming response of people, 2,000 plus people registered, 30 plus CXOs confirmed for this talk, the event is now happening in 3 editions: the product, data, and design. The product edition just concluded about 10 days ago. 1,500 plus people participated across the globe for amazing sessions. So we are in the 4th day of the data edition, and the design edition will happen in the 2nd week of June. So while IPL designs and delivers these programs across the globe, it also nurtures a community of product professionals in this country. And as a result of that, we also have an open conference day on the 5th day of this edition, where various speakers from the community have nominated some interesting topics to talk. I'd encourage you to take a moment, click on that QR code that you see in front of you with your mobile phone. It takes you to a page where you can actually vote for your favorite topics or the topics that you want to hear the speaker speak, right? And if you vote for them and they get to speak and they get shortlisted and get to speak, you will win some incredible prizes. So please take a moment, go ahead and do that. If you're unable to scan the QR code, there will be a link that is also posted on the chat room. Click on that and do that same, right? And there's also a fun element in this conference where we have the leaderboard. Leaderboard is again a simple web page where it asks you to do a couple of steps. Scan that QR code and you'll directly go to that page. And every step you take, you win some points. And once whoever is on the top of the leaderboard at the end of the day, you get to sit down with an industry executive for a 30-minute one-on-one session around career counseling. Right, the theme of overall all these conferences, Product Leadership Festival, is career insights in product design and data. So it's a great opportunity to sit with some of the industry stalwarts and get some guidance on that. So don't miss out on that opportunity. Do take that step. Now, here's another important thing. For every session that we have here, there is a dedicated LinkedIn thread that is created, right? So scan that QR code and you'll be taken to that LinkedIn thread. Now, the purpose of this is, as audience, you can please ask the questions that you have around the topic, around the discussion, so that the team that is monitoring that will pick it up and we ask the relevant questions for the speaker here. It serves multiple advantages, because if you post the questions on the chat room on Zoom, it's hard to monitor because there's often a lot of chatter. also the questions get lost once the session is over, right? So encourage all of you to use that LinkedIn thread to post your questions, and I will pick up the relevant ones, the common ones, and ask the speakers to do it, to address them, right? Please refrain from posting these questions on the chat room. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Girish, if you can turn on your video and say hello, just to check whether we can see you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Girish.
Okay, good. Nice to see you, Girish. Thanks for joining. So, folks, Girish works as he's currently head of product management at Freshworks. I'm sure many of you in India have heard of Freshworks. It's India's largest B2B SaaS company offering products in the area of customer engagement. I guess the category has been changing for a long time. Moving from CRM to customer engagement management, and now moving towards customer experience. So I'm sure Freshworks has some amazing products both on the sales side and the support side. So Girish heads the product management for the support business unit. So before that, Girish actually, pretty interesting. He transitioned from embedded software experience at Cisco, and also was a co-founder of a company that created a software product for civil engineers, right? So which is fascinating. Maybe we will ask him why that passion of creating a product to solve problems for civil engineers, probably in the area of estimation and anything. Then I guess he moved into mobile CRM, and now he's heading the product management at Freshdesk. I believe, Girish, you also are an investor. Looks like there was some news just a few days ago that you made some investment in an interesting startup. I'll leave it up to you if you want to mention that later, but always good to see folks like you encouraging and helping early stage startup companies to grow into successful companies. So with that, Girish, over to you. If you can begin. The topic for today, of course, is building moments of wow in data-driven products. Yes, we can see your slide deck, and let's go on with that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sai, for the introduction. And not really an investor. Warren Buffett is an investor, and probably like what my LinkedIn title should say, investment enthusiast. So with that, thanks a lot for the introduction. And I know this is the beginning of the data track for the IPL webinar season, right? So my talk is going to be a little bit thought-provoking from data perspective, because I'm starting with what I call as moment of wow, and why sometimes it's hard to build for moments of wow in business products, and what it really takes to build products for that, right? So you'll see this is both about data and not about data at the same time. I'm hoping it is thought-provoking, and I look forward to all the conversation post the
absolutely
brief on the topic as well, right?
Yeah.
So hello everyone. I was wondering, because this is an online event that has moved to an offline event, what is the most non-awkward way to start? And I took refuge in XKCD, as I generally do when I'm faced with an awkward situation. So you can all see how I think the situation is. So once again, hi to everyone. Right? Okay. So, so what do I mean as moments of wow? Simply put, if you think of our life in general, we always think of a well-lived life is all about memories. If you're 40 years old, when you think of your last 20 years, you probably don't remember everything that happened in your life. You remember some moments, right? You remember those memories that made you happy, where you felt that you were pleasantly surprised, sometimes shocked, where you felt let down, or so you only remember those moments, and those are really the high points and low points of your life. And products are a lot like that. When you engage with products, you can use it for a day, you can use it for 10 years. All you'll remember is sometimes did the product ever make you frustrated a little bit? Did it really put a smile on your face? I'm sure almost all of us now thank Gmail now that they've started filling the first name of people, right? So if you just type hi and whatever name you have in the two, they auto suggest it and it's just a tab away. Now that puts a smile to your face. When you think about it, you feel so much happy. because it also saves you embarrassment. It saves you embarrassment as a consumer of the product, makes you look smart, that you don't get the names wrong, right? So that's a very small thing. If you really think in the context of Gmail and all of the 100 things that they'll need to build, it's probably a small thing, but really did put a smile to your face. So you think of Gmail, the product, and the next time you look at another email client, this is probably one of the things you might miss, right? So that's what I mean by moments. That I mean, these are small moments. These are moments of wow that you will remember and you'll keep with you. And these necessarily don't need to be large features. This can also be a really key functionality, but it can also be something small, right? So that's what I mean as moments of wow. And through probably the next 30 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about how do products look at it, why sometimes it's difficult to build for these moments of wow. And as a product manager, how can you think about it? Like with most things, this is a framework. You can, it doesn't apply to everyone at the same level, but I do think there are interesting ideas that you can take away irrespective of what type of product you're managing, right? Be it direct to consumer or a business software. So I started this saying business software doesn't need to be boring. And why I call that out specifically is that if you really look at the last 20 years of all software development, really after computers started coming into every space, you first got it to a point where it just needed to be functional. So if you're doing something with pen and paper, or if you're filing stuff away in a folder, you wanted to digitize that because it's easier to maintain. It is a very functional need. But then once the functional need is met, then you have the urge to make it better to use, to make it not boring. If you really look at that whole history and where we are today, almost every business user of a product expects a product to be not boring. And it's very hard because as a business, you're always incentivized to look at how to make it functionally rich. So you really need to be deliberate as a product manager to ensure your product isn't boring. You also need to keep a constant eye to see what are both the consumer trends and specific vertical trends that happen in your business, so that you don't feel like a product of the past, right? Both of these things contribute to how you think about moments of wow and how, as a continuity, you build that in your product. And the hard thing is context, right? A lot of the times when when I spoke about the Gmail example, right? We understand what a moment of wow looks like. We understand what might put a smile in the face of our user, but sometimes building it out is hard, right? And business context, therefore, is very important. And when I say business context, the example I spoke about on the Gmail one is specifically not on like UX, right? It was not about a visual element on the product. It was actually helping you do your job better, right? So you need to understand the context of what your customers want, and business context should always trump how you think about these moments of wow. So it should not be restricted to a UI gimmick sometimes, or it should not be restricted to how you think of a nifty functionality. It should always be in the umbrella of what your business context is. And think of it like when you joke to somebody, right? Some jokes work with a set of audience. Some jokes don't work with a set of audience. What really changes is the context, right? The same applies to product building. So you need to understand the business context of what your users' life is, and then decide what qualifies as a moment of wow. And the second one is, again, that's why I said there's probably going to be a slight antidote to the entire data session. It's not only about vanity metrics, and I'm sure you will see more in the series where you'll talk about what is the right things to measure. Good usability will always trump vanity metrics, because metrics, like with most things in life, it is always paved with good intentions. But over time, it kind of becomes like religion, where you started the metric with something in mind, and over time it takes a form of its own, where the metric in itself becomes a goal, whereas the metric was always a proxy for good usability, right? Because good usability is very fuzzy to define, and it's also very hard to scale within your team. So if one person has good taste, how do you really scale that across your team? And it's very hard, therefore, to formalize this type of tribal knowledge. Therefore, you resort to metrics where you try to use them as good proxies in the hope that it will evolve over time to really capture the essence of what you meant as good taste. Now, a lot of the times, these metrics end up being vanity metrics. So, to really build products with great moments in them, you need to always keep in mind that good usability trumps your vanity metrics, and you'll need to be able to differentiate between which metrics are vanity metrics and which aren't. So now, having understood that what qualifies as a moment of wow and why it's important, you see products everywhere, and every product manager would be able to relate to it, saying, but these are sometimes hard to build, right? It's hard to build even fully knowing what is the value. That's because the first one is measurable business value. When you think of some of these things, you won't be able to measure the direct business value. And there is a constant struggle that I've seen most product teams, including me as a product manager, that I face when I think of what is the value in delivering this one small thing. Maybe 10 of them put together over time makes it good, or is it just one of it? It's always very hard, therefore, to keep focus and say, hey, what is the measurable business value? And a lot of the times, the functional features and the pressure they create on a roadmap is very real. So irrespective of the size of your company and the maturity cycle of your product, where the roadmap pressure on functional capabilities is always very real, and it is a lot more louder. It has a lot more champions within the company. But as product manager, to fight for and think of these moments of wow is one of the axes that you need to keep in mind, and that's one of the things I've seen that makes it hard to build. And the third one is revenue impact, right? And you will have to measure growth. You will have to measure revenue impact, because as a business, a lot of the time, the business exists to create value for the shareholders and the employees, right? So you'll need to have revenue impact, but you cannot measure every single activity that you do with the lens of a revenue impact only. That will make it very hard to look at some of the intangible things till you get to a measurement framework, right? And my favorite analogy on this has always been, a lot of times our thoughts are limited by our vocabulary. If I speak English well, I can articulate some of the things better in English. Let's say I don't speak Hindi as well. If you ask me to speak about the same topic in Hindi, I will struggle. Right? It's the same way in how you measure things as well, right? Where to articulate the value of something, a lot of times you're constrained by your own ability to measure it. That doesn't mean what you're building is in itself not of value, but you're restricted by your ability to articulate it. So revenue, therefore, should be a very important North Star metric, but it should not be your only metric. And that will make it, if it is, then that will make it hard to really craft your product to build these moments of wow. And the last one, which I've seen as a constant struggle for product teams, is to really identify the right ones, right? Because as your product grows, and when you look at what your customers are talking about your product, what your competitors are doing, what you wish as a product manager, and your own vision for the future that you want to build, it's sometimes very hard to identify the right ones. One of the things that is hard in really building for this moment of wow is you shouldn't also be swayed away in building things that are vanity, right? Things that feel cool, and I use cool in a very broad way, which is that things that feel cool shouldn't really drive customer value should, right? So how do you get them? I believe data plus intuition is what can create the magic. And I feel very strongly about this, where I believe data driven is often very misunderstood. And therefore, we've really given it a bad reputation in some way, right? Data informed is a much better framework to look at. And what I mean by data informed is simply that when you're trying to understand your own business space, where your product is playing in and what your customer problems are, it's always important to start with a hypothesis rather than starting from what the current data tells you. Because your ability to interpret the data, your ability to measure the right metrics get in the way. So therefore, it's important to start from a testable hypothesis and use data to inform yourself, to ensure you're not going into a rabbit hole that you lead your team into a place where you're not building something of value. So being data informed is far superior to making data drive the decision. And I feel as a product manager, you're really in the business of taking decisions, right? And as long as you get 8 or 9 out of 10 right, you'll do well as a product manager. But and even in a given day, from your most strategic decisions to your most tactical decisions, there are enough decisions for you to take, and you cannot use data as a clutch to avoid taking decisions, right? So think of it like a well-balanced meal. You need to look at data, but you still need to trust your own intuition. And as a product manager, intuition is like any other skill, right? You will need to build on it, be deliberate about it, and this is the best way for you to create the magical moments. You'll need to the products that build, and I can give you tons of examples within my own product and other products that I use and see, where these moments are most likely driven by a hypothesis and then backed by data, as opposed to only being driven by data, because data always gives you the picture for what happened already, right? The very fact that you're measuring something means that you know the value of it. So if you're trying to create something new, the trailing indicator will not help you. So with that said, how to build this intuition, and where do you start? And it's a constant learning process, irrespective of how long you've been as a PM in a particular space. I believe it's a transferable skill. You can be a PM in a large enterprise one day, move to a startup another day, or completely move from domains, right? I think Sai was talking about, I started out as an embedded engineer and then building for construction companies, and then web applications and B2B SaaS now. I believe a really transferable skill is focusing on what your customers want. And again, here you need to distill down what your customers tell you vis-a-vis what they want, right? So a few things that you can practically apply are looking at customer win stories. Always read the entire story and look at it as a story, right? Look at how somebody made the decision to use your product. As hard as it is sometimes to imagine, people don't go through completely rational ways to decide on what products to use, right? There is always an aspect of one or two things staying with someone. And especially if you're in a B2B context, you need to understand what drives your decision maker and what are the key goals they're focused on. So listen to the stories on how something gets started, how they evaluated the product, and what really eventually ended up being the reason why you won. So that's a really good place to start to fine-tune your intuition. Talk to your sales team. Ask what they love about your product. Now, this is a slightly double-edged sword, right? Your sales team, when given access to a product manager, will want to tell about all the 1,000 things that you can build for them, right? And believe me, the list will be very long. But the trick is still to ensure we can talk with them, right? And they should enjoy talking with you as a product manager, and look for what they love in your product. Because as much as you can look at how you want to grow the product organically via in-product techniques, your sales team and all your field folks, all your customer-facing teams are your best, are really your best bet to scale everything that you're thinking, right? So they need to be your friends. They need to be champions that can relay the same thinking that you have while you're building the product. So ask them what they love about the product. And more important than that, listen to their demos. A lot of the times, you will catch that even your best salesperson, there is a change in how their voice moves up and down. When they're talking about the products, parts of your product that they're not proud of, or they think is less than perfect, you will see their voice drop. You'll see they're not as confident talking about it. It isn't really their go-to thing when they really begin. So look for those cues. Those are examples that you can fix. Those are areas of the product that may or may not be captured in your aggregate metrics, but it will quickly show up when you listen to that demo on. And this is like the first time I, as a kid, if you start spelling complex words, right, you wonder whether there is two S in Mississippi or one S in Mississippi when you write the word for the first time. You think of what you do as a kid, right? You'll write it in a way that people can't make out the actual spelling. You'll write it in a way it's so confusing to read. The equivalent of that in a sales demo is somebody's voice going down, where they're trying to move away, where they're trying to quickly jump to the next topic. Look for those cues. Those are subtle cues, but that will really help you build your intuition as a product manager on what and which part of your product you need to focus on. And once you've done a few things to understand your domain well, and you've started forming these hypotheses in your mind, and you have an opinion on which are things that you should be building to specifically look at delight for your customer, there will be two more things that you need to overcome. Again, this is not something that I claim to have completely overcome. It's a constant thing to keep an eye on, right? The first one is your overall consistency and product design principles. They are always less important than your customer's work, because you'll need to understand the day in the life of a customer and see how you can make it better for them. Sometimes your own need for consistency within the product needs to take a backseat. It's very hard as a PM to give in sometimes, but it is very important. You will need to realize that it is less important than what your customer wants to achieve. And there'll be a lot of internal constraints, and there's a whole spectrum of is it hard to build? Is that the right ROI? Are there multiple teams that need to be convinced? There are so many internal constraints, and depending on the maturity of the product and size of your company, this will keep compounding. But it's important to always keep in mind that your internal constraints are less important than your customer's convenience. It's something that as a product manager, you are the champion for internally, right? You'll need to keep being the advocate for this. And this is a good fight. Both of these are good fights, and there needs to be a champion for it. And there's nobody better than the product manager to be a champion for both of this, right? So once you identify, you have an intuition, and you have hopefully testable hypothesis, you should constantly fight both of this and ensure that you can go along the path. So how do you go about building? Great teams build great product. It's probably the most cliched thing. I'm sure that's a tautology nobody would disagree to. But there's a nuanced balance in that, right? If you want a great engineer, you want a great designer, you want a great marketer, then that means as a product manager, you'll need to ensure that you can give the right space for all of these functions to make this a great team. A lot of times, everybody wants the best people in their team, but they're not willing to give the space, right? So if you're a product manager, you need to give the space to a designer, to your marketer, to your engineer, to be as much as part of building this out, because you're facilitating this and you're helping take this to market. You're not owning it, right? From a perspective of you're not the only decision maker on it. I think that is the nuance in understanding that great teams build great products. You, as a product manager, you're first among equals. You'll need to get it in a collaborative way, and at the same time ensure the entire team shares the pride in building it, and everybody is committed to doing it. And that will help you make the right trade-offs. It'll help you make it'll help you keep the team motivated to really look for these things and build them, right? And you'd want to build a team that is not dependent on one person saying what to build, right? And I've called out two different things because they get talked about very little when you talk about building moments of wow. Fast is a feature. If you have a performant product that loads and it's super snazzy, now that's a really good feature. As a product manager, even if it's unintentional at the beginning that you didn't really optimize for it, that's a feature you should protect, right? And you'll start really feeling the pain that causes the most customer frustration once you lose it. It's like good health, right? Good performance on a product is exactly like your physical health. Probably don't appreciate it enough while you have it. So fast is a feature. So when you think your moments of wow, see if your product can really be fast, right? And that's really a joy to use. And bug free is a killer wow. Now, the product that I head here at Freshworks is our flagship product. It's our longest product. It's the first product we launched as a company. So we have a lot of bugs. We make a lot of jokes about we are flattening the curve on the bugs every week, but the curve still keeps going up, right? And that's just the reality of it. But if you can rid your product of the nagging issues, keep an eye on it. That is a killer wow. That's a wow that might not be glamorous, but if you really look at customer value, that continues to be a killer wow, right? So that's something that I want you to look at when you think of great products. So with that, I'm going to pause. questions we can take in any order. Sai, you can let me.
Yeah, is there a significance for this picture? I'm trying to, maybe you can help us summarize this instead of everybody's training in and looking at what were you trying to communicate with this?
So because this was going to be the question section, I thought the questions will come in so many ways, right?
Okay.
So we can, at the end of the meeting, maybe bucket the questions into different one.
Yeah.
But I think the larger point is mostly around the idea of questions is a process of discovery, right? Also for the person asking it and for the person answering it.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, when you articulate something, you actually end up understanding it better yourself as well. So I think the questions are as much my attempt at knowing the topic that you're asking better, as much as it's your attempt to getting clarity on the answer, right? So
very smart, very smart. Well, thanks for that. I think there are a lot of things that I loved, at least personally, about the talk. One, there are a couple of things. One is your titles are superb. I think the title communicates essentially the summary of what you wanted to convey that, right? So, and there are a few things that I made note of, which I wanted to summarize and, probably even paraphrase it a little bit for everyone here. I think what you said is, of course, business software doesn't have to be boring, right? And I think it's not just about intention anymore. It is becoming an imperative, right? So a lot of users entering the businesses are now expecting the same level of experience and ease of use and everything as consumer applications, right? Given the new age workforce that joins and everything. So it's more of an imperative. And you said metrics are important, but don't make metrics as a goal, right? And don't have vanity metrics just for the heck of it, because a lot of people talk about metrics. It is cool to talk about metrics, and don't just be cognizant of them, and pick the ones that matter most to your product and your business, right?
and this is something that should evolve, right? What was a good metric when the product was 1 year in the market vis-a-vis when the product is 8 years in the market? It better evolve because the segment you're serving and where you are as a product will significantly change. And that's where a lot of the metrics are misunderstood, sadly. It's almost looked upon as dogma, where this is always what we used to measure. But that's we've also grown, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think important point is to keep in mind that metrics will change as you evolve, as the product evolves, as the business evolves, and choosing the right metrics at right point in time, right? Now, of course, metrics comes into picture when you start collecting data, when you start using data. And you said, don't get sucked into this data-driven decision alone, but be informed with data. And I think I like the fact that you said, you start with a hypothesis and then look at the data, use the data and experiment, and then make a decision, rather than concluding without a hypothesis and an experiment, looking at the data and say, this is what data is telling us, and hence let's go with that, right? Now, all of these things, the reason why I'm so glad to summarize this, these are coming from trenches. These are coming from experience, that prescriptive nuggets, if you will, for everyone, right? The other thing is, I love this one. And I think I'm going to pay more attention to this as well in my career and my growth, is listen to the demos, catch the hesitation, right? I think, it's not just the product managers who are giving demos when the pre-sales or the sales is doing it. You notice at a certain point in time, if the tone changes, if they go low, as you said, those are the areas maybe either you want to enable them better, or there might be hesitation in them about the product itself. And so areas for improvement on that, right? For everyone who works hard in products, right from engineering, products, marketing, everything. So often this comes up that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I think it is useful for customer, but it is so hard to do. It is so difficult to do. So your statement about your constraints are less important than customer convenience, I think hits the nail on its head, right? So while it is difficult, sometimes you have to do a lot of explanation and a lot of cajoling and a lot of coming together. That's essentially the essence of it, right? So awesome. I think at least the ones that I made note, hopefully that brings in. Now we'll get into the questions in a minute, but now slowly I want your perspective, Girish, on how you use data today in your organization, right? So for example, I know Freshworks has an AI engine and it's called Freddy AI, right? So, and maybe you could help us understand how Freddy AI in your context, in the product that you head and lead the team, helps the customers, or rather how you use it to build it, right, to solve the customer pain points. But before we get to that, I want to take a really quick poll from the audience to understand what they think about where data and data science especially is used in the product management function, right? So this is about, what is the, I'm sure there are many different uses of data science, and in the last 3-4 days we've had some amazing sessions with applied data science use cases and everything. So I encourage everyone on the call to take about 10 seconds to view. We really, maybe we should target about 85% voting here, right? And I think that gives us a really good insight, both to Girish, but to ourselves, all of us, on what do you think is the most popular use of data science in product management. Often we hear teams and product managers, product leaders talking about, we do data-driven decisions, but in what context, right? So while the team votes on it, while the participants votes on it, Girish, maybe you could give us a little bit context and example-driven approach of Freddy AI and how you used data to create something that helps customers.
Right. So two different questions, right? So first one is, how do we use data in general within the company for the decisions that we want to be building? So broadly, all of Freshworks is in the B2B space. We're building customer engagement software for different teams in a enterprise, right? So we look at data to understand by segment of customers, by usage and what we need to build. And because largely we're building workflow software across like customer support or IT teams or HR teams and sales teams and so on. So we look at what will make the persona of a salesperson or a customer support person or a manager in a particular function, what will make their life easy. And we look at data to understand what are the tasks to be done there. And that's our first input. So that's something that we look at. And also because AI in our products is primarily catering to, we believe, the best way that you can build AI embedded in products. AI is a lot like a good UX. 10 years back, good UX was considered a separate feature that you have on top of your product. AI is probably a little bit in that stage currently where you think of it as something you build on top of what you have.
It's like an add-on, it's like patched on top of that.
Exactly. I think, but we are getting to the stage, and it's coming probably fast at us, that we're getting to a stage where it's going to be integral to how you think, right? So how a beautiful product became the norm with millennials in the workforce, I do believe an intelligent product will also start becoming the norm a little bit, right? So our Freddy across all of our products is catered therefore to make humans and bots come together better in different functions, right? So in customer support, it's about how much can the bot handle and where because where you require good judgment and empathy, it's still better left to a human. I still think we are far away from the robots rising to that level, right? So I think so you can take off what is mundane out of the human and have bots handle that. Then the things that require empathy, judgment, and things that are more complex, then your team can really give the personal touch. So that's probably how we look at embedding AI features in our products, and that's why Freddy the platform and our investments along those lines.
Excellent. I think so essentially right now, or at least a year ago, AI looked cool enough to add to what, powered by AI or something, but rapidly that's becoming so interwoven that, nobody really wants to hear, as a customer, as a consumer, we all really don't want to hear that I'm being helped by a machine, I'm being helped by a program, right? We all want to interact with humans, but it gets so interwoven and so beautiful that we don't give it a second thought. But essentially, interwoven machine, artificial intelligence and things built into it. So there are some interesting questions that are coming in. Rohit Nagpal asks, if you have a lot of customers, right? And I'm sure, Freshworks has about 150,000, 200 customers, small, medium enterprises across the world, or probably even more. How do you even identify what those moments of wow are to build, right? And with a large customer base, or do you pick up with existing features and start tweaking them to say, let's create a wow moment here, or is it altogether new?
So, like some of the things I did have in the presentation, it is a combination of looking at customer stories, looking at how our own support team uses our product, looking at what our customers say. So it comes from a testable hypothesis from those conversations, and we use. So we have more than 200,000 customers globally. So we use that uh, to really see, is this used by so many people? Because one of the advantages that you have with a large customer base is if you ship something out, you get almost instant feedback, right? Because so many people are going to be using it. So we do start with, and we've also gone through multiple ways of trying to action this, right? Where we've tried approaches where just one team looks at it. We've tried approaches where we ask every team to look at it. And I think depending on so many other dynamics where you on the size of the product, on individual product manager, designer preferences, etc. You'll always have a mix of some teams will do a little more of this, some teams will do a little less of this.
Sorry to interject. Do you have an example in your case where you would say you rolled out a feature and then you obviously collected information about the usage of that feature and then realized that, okay, either this is not being used or this is being used in a way that we didn't intend it to be used? And so how do we make it better to create that wow moment to the users? Is there any example that you could illustrate it with us?
Yeah, I'm thinking without the need to understand the product, what can be a good example? But I'll tell you our general thing that we look at, right? So when we launch something, we look at adoption because we have enough instrumentation in place to understand at an aggregate level, anonymized aggregate level, how many people are using something, and in some things where there are different stages, where do they drop off, etc. That gives us the first insight, right? At an aggregate level, first to know, is this not even discovered? Because a lot of the times when you build, especially in enterprise software, 90% of your features are not used by 90% of your customers, right? That's just the reality of it. So you'll first thing that the data will tell you is it discovered enough? Right? And that actually is a starting point to even know the impact. So we look at that. We look at, is it discovered enough by the right segment of customers, and then see in the funnel what do they use and what do they not use. And one of the big advantages we also have is, I mean, we are a customer support product. We also support our customers using our own product. So when we get feedback, our support team is a good channel for our feedback. We also look at feedback that comes in from customers as another as one of the axes to look at to see what is working and what isn't.
Okay, so a couple of questions on, I'm trying to paraphrase here, is do you have in your organization, is the data team or the so-called data team, is that a dedicated data team from which all the product teams rely on, or is it more of a horizontal where every product team there is an embedded data team in it?
More of the latter, because we also have platforms that can be used by every PM. So there is access to data, but we also have focused data teams for a few of the programs, right, where it is necessary to have one. And also most of the times the team structure and the strategy around, do you have a central team or a distributor team, etc., changes a lot with business priorities. A lot of sense on is there increased focus on something. But I think what I've largely seen work both at Freshworks and otherwise is you need to have access and people should know where to go, right? And it should be easy enough, because with data, one of the other interesting nuances is, I think on a first principle level, everybody would want to look at data, but if you really don't go with a question, right, data is not very helpful. It will just be so many numbers on it. You'll see it, but you don't know what to do with it, right? So you might also need to ensure people start with the right questions to ask and then start looking at data. Otherwise, you look at a lot of data and you can feel good about it, but it might not be actionable enough for you to take the next step. So,
So I think, that kind of a line, is similar to what the question one of the audience, Anil Vignesh from Nielsen, is asking, and I'm sure he comes from the user experience or user research background. For a long time, when we said create moments of wow, often it was understood that you create such a beautiful experience, user experience, and that becomes a moment of wow. And of course, user experience heavily relies on user research, talking to customers, understanding their needs, and then bringing those things and incorporating them into the journey, right? But now, and that has not gone away, obviously, but now one of the dominant ways, and as you also explained before, is now you instrument the way the products, features are used, how they are used, and you collect information, and then you start studying those, right? And so, which do you also use a balance of both, or is it more on looking at the information on data collected through instrumentation and saying, looks like, a customer is struggling to use this particular feature in the product because it's taking them 3 seconds as opposed to what we designed it for 1 second, and hence we need to improve this. Does that balance work?
Right. I mean, so you will have to instrument, and you still need to do user research, but one does not necessarily exclude the other, right? And also, when you look at trying to understand aggregate metrics, the challenge also is, especially in B2B, not so much in direct to consumer, because the broad use cases would be very similar. Like if you think of, let's say, my Google Pay app, right? Almost everybody uses it for a very well-defined use case, but that wouldn't be the case with a B2B software, where teams would use it differently. So to really know what are the intended use cases is a bit of a discovery. And therefore, user research and direct customer stories cannot fully be replaced with aggregate metrics, because otherwise it might actually sway you into making slightly subpar decisions. But it has to be a balance of both. You need to look at aggregate metrics too, because you also don't want to have a lot of recency bias, right? Like, you don't want it to be done because you saw it with one customer and you feel very passionate about it. We're all guilty of it sometimes. So you want to ensure that as a PM, once you make up your mind, that you have enough conviction to see it through. But before you really make up your mind, you double guess yourself enough by looking at enough aggregate data to really guide your decision.
Right. Super. One often asked question is, especially, you mentioned product management. Essentially, the role is to make decisions. The job is to make decisions, informed by data and customer discussions, understanding the customer, all of that. And now when you're talking about data-informed decisions, when you're picking a team of product managers, right? Are you looking for somebody who has done traditional product management for some time? When I say traditional, of course, I'm not talking about 15 years ago, or even maybe that, but somebody who comes with the typical traditional product management skills or now with more digital skills, right? Digital product management, where more of instrumentation, feature, flags, capturing data, analyzing that data, looking at making that decision. So is it more from data analytics, data science to product management, or a product manager picking up the data skills? Which one would you prefer, or do you look for mostly?
My team is a mix of everyone, right? It has engineers become product managers. I'm an engineer becoming product manager. That's the route I came in. There are sales engineers who become product managers. There are customer support people who become product managers, marketers who sometimes want to try product management.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you understand the domain enough, and if you have a taste for problem solving, you can always attempt it. I do believe the ability to analyze data and ability to make decisions is a skill, right? So and with all the skills, it will come with doing. You'll need to exercise it enough to try and do it, even if you make a few mistakes along the road. So I've had a mix. I've also seen like a few traits that generally, irrespective of the background, right? People are comfortable taking decisions, and I think that's a very key skill. And also, a lot of times you need to also be the person who can rally to a decision. Meaning, even if it's not a decision that you can completely take yourself, can you have the right people and move them to make the decision, right? Like if you want your engineer to make a choice on something on architecture, you might not have the expertise to actually make the decision in that case, but you need to be the forcing function to make that decision. I think those are skills that are very transferable, irrespective of where you start from. So can you be the first among equals quickly, and can you also be the person who can drive the consensus and move on? So I think those are things that broadly apply.
Yeah. Now, the reason there is a corollary to that, right? And if you're a person in that role, working with engineers, working with data science teams, and you are going to collaborate with each and every one of them, it is expected that this person who is prioritizing things or defining things or defining the outcomes should understand at least a little bit of data science and data analytics or data engineering or any of these things. Is that a fair understanding that this person should have working understanding or knowledge of these?
Yes, and I think that also extends to engineering, right? If you want to be a good product manager, you'll need to understand engineering enough, because you need to empathize with your engineers too. On if something is hard, they probably are saying it because it is hard, right? So, so I think an empathy to user should also translate empathy to your own team. The only caveat there is sometimes all of us are guilty of really extending the empathy to the extent of just giving into the constraint, right? So that's a constant struggle, but you need to have working knowledge at least at a block diagram level of how some of these things work. Otherwise, it's very hard to really imagine and see what you can build.
Awesome. Well, that's all we had time for, and really appreciate you, Girish, taking your time. Just before you go, some really quick ones, and let me just try and share my screen. So the best question today goes to award goes to Rohit Nagpal. I think you addressed that question. Great question. Keep those questions coming in for even subsequent session, folks. Thank you, Girish, for again taking your time. For the audience, please take quick moment, scan this and give us some feedback. Give us a feedback on what you liked about it and what you think we should improve overall from a session perspective. This is really useful and required for us to make this better. And Girish, thank you so much for virtual certificate of appreciation. You'll get the certificate in email as well. Take care and good night. And folks, before so there is a very interesting session coming up now. Just give us a few minutes break. This is an amazing topic, something that I've been looking forward to from Ravi Vijay Raghavan. But before we take a 2-minute break, Sonal, over to you. I think there'll be a quick poll of feedback, and I encourage all of you to give that feedback, please. I think I see several folks on the call, but seeing only 50 or 60% of folks voting. I think it just takes a click of a button. So go ahead and give that feedback.
Thank you, Sai.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, guys. We'll be starting in 5 minutes. Please do take the feedback meanwhile. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is that Ravi?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Ravi, we're just taking a few-minute break from the session, 4 minutes more.
No problem. Can I just see if you can, I can share screen and all that?
Yes, we could quickly do that. You can turn on the video if you want.
Okay, yes, let me do that.
Yeah.
You can't start your video because the host has stopped it, it says. So
Okay.
you need to allow me to.
Let me.
Same thing, you need to let me share as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll make you a co-host and then you can get
Yeah,
to go.
yeah.
Not a problem.
Okay. Let's see. I can start.
Nirav, you can share your
Yeah, can you see me now? Yeah. You should be seeing me now, and then
Yes. Yes, I can.
I can share my screen as well.
Yep.
You can see my
Super.
screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay,
Yep.
good.
Okay, we'll start in about 4 minutes. Ravi.
Hang on, I'm having some trouble. I don't know how to move this thing. Oh, here.
Yeah,
Okay.
or you just click on that and use your arrow keys. That works fine too.
No, this is great. This is
Okay.
just great.
Cool.
Okay, then I can do this and I'm set. Yeah. Good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm good. You can hear me well, right?
Yeah.
The sound is good.
Loud
Good.
and clear. Loud and clear.
Very good.
So we'll join back in 4 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. I'm here. Mm-hmm.
everyone. A very warm welcome to the Product Leadership Festival 2020 Data Edition. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And before we get on to our second session of the evening, allow me to introduce our host of the evening, Mr. Sai Satish Vedam. Sai is a senior faculty and an executive coach at Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Director of Product Management at Oracle. Hi Sai, it's good to have you today.
Thank you, Sonal. Good evening again, everyone. For those of you continuing with us, thanks for staying. And for those of you who are joining right now, before I introduce you to our speaker today and an amazing session, let me just take a couple of moments to talk about the Product Leadership Festival itself. So Product Leadership Festival is hosted by Institute of Product Leadership, which started in 2012 with a singular purpose of creating 10,000 product leaders in this country, right? And it works with universities and corporates and designs and delivers programs to senior working professionals, helping them to transition into product leadership roles, right? And as part of this, for the last 7.5 years, the Institute has built and nurtured a robust community of aspiring product folks and current product leaders. And, there are amazing speakers from the community who have nominated a topic to talk on the 5th day of the Product Leadership Data Edition, right? So usually every year there is a conference that is hosted by IPL, an actual physical conference. But this year, given the current situation, the conference moved virtual, and overwhelmed by the response from registrations and speakers, this is now running in 3 editions: the product edition, data edition, and the design one. The product edition just concluded 12 days ago. Amazing response, 2,000 plus folks registered, 1,500 people joined from all over the world, 20 plus CXOs gave some incredible actionable insights. And we are in the 4th day of data edition, and it's a repeat all over again. Amazing sessions, great insights. And there is a data design edition, in the 2nd week of June. So in the context of open conference, I encourage all of you to take a moment, scan the QR code and go to that web page, look at the topics that are submitted by the community, and then vote for the favorite topic that you want to listen to, right? And there is no limit on how many votes you can do. Please go ahead and choose as many as you can. And if the speaker gets shortlisted to talk tomorrow, you would get an incredible gift, right? So you could redeem that gift and it'll be sent to you right away. So if you're not able to scan that QR code, click on the link that you see on the chat box and do that. There's another fun element here where you can go to a leaderboard by scanning the QR code and take a couple of steps. With each step, you get some points. And if you're on top of the leaderboard, you get to sit down with an industry executives for 30 minutes one-on-one career counseling session, right? I would certainly love that, to have that conversation. Don't, make best use of that opportunity. Go ahead right away and scan that code and take those actions. Now, another important aspect here is, this is while we have speakers giving their insights and perspectives on topics, this is more of an engagement and conversation with the audience. To facilitate that, for every session, we have created a dedicated LinkedIn thread, right? So you scan the QR code, you'll be taken to that LinkedIn page. Please ask your questions there instead of the chat box on the Zoom, because it's hard to monitor that, those questions on the chat box. So the team, and myself will be monitoring those questions, and we'll pick the most relevant ones and, pose it to the speaker, and they can, address that. So there are several advantages of it. The conversation can continue even after the Zoom conference ends. So please make use of it. I request all of you to refrain from asking those questions here, right? So with that, it is my privilege to introduce to all of you, Dr. Ravi Vijay Raghavan. Welcome, Ravi. If you can now turn on your video and say hi, so that we know that you're there and we can hear you. And
hello, everybody. Hope you can see me. I can't see my own. Yeah, let me try to figure this out.
You can. Yeah, okay. We can see you. Yeah. Nice. Cool. Thanks for joining again. Folks, again, it's my privilege to invite Ravi here. He is If you're not familiar with Ravi, he is nominated, for 4 times the 10 most influential analytics leader in this country, right? For 4 times consecutively. He's also vice president and head of analytics and decision sciences organization of a company. I'm not sure if many of you have heard, but it's called Flipkart, right? Flipkart, of course, is a household name. So because I'm introducing and Ravi is joined us, let's keep the questions related to data analytics and how it is used in the organizations, as opposed to where is my package, right? So please keep the conversations to the context, and I'm sure we will get more insights from him, and there are better ways to get your problem solved. So Ravi essentially leads this analytics practice and organization, helping Flipkart making decisions both from a strategic business decisions as well as the ones that impact customers and consumer experience as well, right? Before that, Ravi was a chief data scientist, and he was also a global head of analytics for 24/7 AI. I'm sure many of you have heard of that company. It is in the area of customer engagement and customer service. Great products there. So Ravi holds a PhD from University of Wisconsin Wisconsin at Madison, and also an MBA from Ross School of Business, right? All Ivy League schools here. And what is I can't miss this one. Ravi is a recipient of Henry Ford Technology Award. He worked at Ford as well, and that is the highest technical recognition given at Ford. So, and of course, you can't have a data analytics leader without having a number of patents. So he holds about 25 plus patents in these areas. So it's an honor, Ravi. Thank you. And welcome to the Product Leadership Festival, day 4 of this. And please start with your talk and presentation. And after that, I will be monitoring the questions and I'll pick the relevant ones. We'll also ask some polls just to get some insights from, about the audience and what they think about few things, but I'd let you get started right away.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you very much. And really appreciate your invitation to come and give a talk here. Thank you, everybody, and for making the time this late in the evening to listen to this. Can you all hear, Sai, can everybody hear me well?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. And so here is the format. I will try to go through fairly quickly the presentation because I don't want to spend it's a reasonable size presentation, but it can easily be covered in 25-30 minutes. And then I'll choose to do that and then leave the rest of the time for discussions. Before I get into the presentation even, right, I think there are two broad ways by which my organization operates in Flipkart, right? One is driving business and product decisions. What product should be made? Is the product, are the features that are made working well? Are they improving consumer experiences, so on and so forth? That's one aspect which I would call measurement science. And the other is building a sort of intelligence that can be productized, which is the other aspect of it, right? I'll talk a little bit about both, and then we can get to the conversation thing. Can you see my presentation?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Okay,
Yeah.
so this needs to, can you see it now?
No.
No? Okay, so let me see. Maybe it's not sharing yet. Okay. Okay, share screen. I'm choosing this and then I'm saying share.
Yep.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So that's great. So we are all good. You can hear me, you can see me, and you can see the presentation. Okay. So let's start from there. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to talk about is analytics and data science for e-commerce. I'm going to go through 2 or 3 very small case studies. So there are tons of from where it came from, and we can go on and on about it. But the purpose here is to make it a little bit more interactive, right? So let's start with this. First, it's important to understand the scale of the business, right? Because at the end of the day, I think the real challenge in companies like Flipkart or any of these big internet companies is not so much what you build, but what you build to scale, right? So this is broadly the scale of Flipkart: 80 million products, 80 plus categories, 1 billion monthly visits. It's around 35 million, 30 million a day. 200, it's probably closer to 250 million registered users, and so on. So this is the scale. So that's about a quarter of, not maybe not a quarter, 1/5, 1/6 of India or something like that. But that's the scale of the business. Yeah. And first section, I'll talk a little bit about how do we use data analytics and data science to make strategic decisions. And then I'll go with the 1 or 2 use case studies. I'm looking at my watch here. It's around 8:10. So I'll try to close this by 8:35, 8:40 latest. And so leave time for 8:35, I'll target, leave time for questions. Yeah.
No problem.
So
Take your time.
yeah. So I'll go a little bit quickly through the exam use cases and so on, because the purpose here is to show the kind of work rather than go deeply into the use case. So pardon me if I don't go too deep into any of the use cases, but I'll try to cover them. Yeah. So first thing, right? So what does this organization do? What does strategic decision making at Flipkart mean? What does it mean from the perspective of data and technology, right? So there are three, I would say, three kinds of things we do, right? Three broad kind of decision making constructs that are there. The most common one, this is very, very important, right? This is probably the most important. See, people, you hear a lot about machine learning and the last part, right? Data assisted machine decisions, so on and so forth. But if you look at it, this measurement science is the core to how any good internet scale company is run. And the beauty of these companies is you keep getting data, and so you can actually make very clear, thoughtful decisions as long as you have the measurement science built really well, right? So what does it mean? It means building statistical and ML driven frameworks to understand. So the way we build our entire business is around a hierarchy of metrics, right? So for example, I start with a strategy. Strategy may mean this year I'm going to focus on customer growth and customer experience, and maybe a little bit less on a few other dimensions, right? So which means my core L0 metric that I'm going to drive for the company is going to be maybe move my NPS from point A to point B, or move my customer growth metrics from point A to point B, increase my DAU, daily active users, monthly active users, so on and so forth. And that's what I'm going to target, right? So then that becomes my L0 metric. And then based on sort of a hierarchical framework, I build drivers for each one of these. So for example, if NPS was my North Star metric, then the drivers of that would be maybe delivery speed, maybe not having a breach of delivery, maybe product quality, maybe packaging quality, maybe customer service, so on and so forth. What this does is we build a hierarchical framework. So what are the L1 metrics that lead to this NPS L0 metric, and what are the relative importance? So we will build a model that will say that what is the relative importance of pricing versus speed versus XYZ for this particular cohort of customers, and so on. For each one of these, now speed is the next, speed of delivery is the next L1 metric to L0, the NPS L0. Then what drives speed, and so on and so forth, right? So if you think about it, we will build models that will hierarchically represent the entire company's business, all leading up to this North Star metric, let us say in this case is customer experience, right? So which means that no individual leader in the company has to worry about customer experience. They have to worry about their metric. If there is a logistics head, that person has to worry about delivery speed. In their team, one person may have to worry about how stressed their fulfillment centers are getting, or their warehouses are getting, so on and so forth. So there is a very clear hierarchy, and we will give them each layer of that hierarchy a metric. And if they all meet their metrics, what we guarantee based on these models is the NPS target will be met. So this is what is measurement science, one aspect of measurement science. The other aspect of measurement science, which is the product side of it, is whenever you roll out a feature, do you conduct the right kind of A/B measurement framework, so that I am able to exactly evaluate what is the incremental impact of that feature to the whatever North Star metric that is. If it's customer experience, I should be able to measure feature A. I should run A/B tests where I should be able to say feature A did this to customer experience, right? Again, that itself is a fairly complex science as well, right? Because in some cases, you cannot run a randomized A/B. For example, if you're trying to understand pricing, you cannot give different pricing to different customers, right? But you have to understand what is the impact of that in driving growth and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of sophisticated algorithms like they've used where you will build very similar cohorts, one given a treatment, another not given a treatment, and try to understand what are the impact of that, right? Somebody raised a hand. Do we answer questions during the process, or do we do it in the end?
No, please ignore that. I think
Okay.
there's a lot of other chatter that keeps
Oh,
going.
okay, that's fine.
Oh,
That's
right.
fine. Okay. So then there is data-assisted human decisions, which are typically operations. How do you run your operations? What is the strategic framework for building your speech strategy for the next year, so on and so forth. And then there are data-assisted machine decisions, which is obviously things, classic machine learning, fraud. It could be things like fraud detection. It could be personalization, recommendation. It could be understanding product quality and incorporating that into your discovery signal so that you have a model by which the best quality products surface to the consumer, so on and so forth, right? So these are the three kinds of things that the team works on, right? And obviously, there's a scale of data platform is huge. And you collect data through multiple sort of sources. You have a data platform, and there is a sort of ingestion from various source systems that happen. Then consumption pipelines are built, and the process data is used both in real time in product decisioning and or in offline in sort of building models and making offline decisions. Yeah. And experimentation is a very core part of the culture, and we run 50 plus launches every week. Each launch goes through a A/B experiment. We keep assessing impact. We have global holdouts and so on and so forth. And we do real-time analytics, dashboard monitoring of these things. Yeah. So this gives you a larger sort of a picture. I won't spend a whole lot of time. You can take a quick look at this. Various areas in which this team. So this team is a horizontal. This works with every aspect of the company. And basically it helps. It's the one horizontal which is sort of has a complete end-to-end view of the business. That's another big advantage where you can create sort of very good sort of ability to create strategic decisions because of this horizontal framework. Again, structurally, some companies have a very sort of, they don't have a centralized analytics and sciences org. They have them embedded in their various teams, and both have their pros and cons. But the biggest pro of this sort of structure is we see the business end to end. And so you can see many of the areas where we have understand product insights, understanding what products to build, what is the sort of how is it performing, so on and so forth. User insights, traffic insights, understanding whether we are providing value to our consumers, product assortment, selection. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Do we have the right kind of selection for our consumer base? How do you evaluate that? Supply chain, speed, optimization, service optimization, network optimization, so on and so forth, speech strategy, so on. Seller insights, understanding, onboarding the right kind of sellers, building the right experience, building trust, making sure the right quality of products are onboarded, and trust and safety, which is making sure that we have sellers and buyers. We have to make sure that there is no fraudulent behavior that is happening in either of this two-party marketplace, and making sure that we detect any fraud as early as possible. Yeah. So I'm going to go into a couple of quick examples. First one is through one is about selection, assortment design in retail, whether it's a brick and mortar retail or it's e-commerce. One thing that's very important is the kind of assortment you have. the product assortment that you carry in your property, right? So fundamentally, right, taking a step back, what do e-commerce consumers want? All they want are four things. See, they want to have a good user experience, finding, being able to browse and find the right kind of product, so on. Then they want pricing that works for them and a selection assortment that works for them, in the sense they are able to choose from a few different choices, so that they feel like they are getting exactly what they want. So they should be able to, if they're looking for shirts, you can't give them one shirt, you have to have enough shirts so that they can look, pick and choose, and so on. And finally, once that is done, what is the post-order experience, right? If you're an e-commerce business, this is what we should be working on, right? So now what I'm going to talk about is a simple case of assortment design, right? What is the problem statement here? What is the width and depth of quality of assortment we need? Quality is a whole different topic. We do a lot of science around that, but I'm not going to talk about that in this particular talk. I'm going to talk about width and depth, right? What does width of assortment mean? What does depth of assortment mean? Just to get the definition first is width is the kind of different kinds of product lines you have. Do I have diapers? Do I have grocery? Do I have electronics? Do I have TV? Do I have some esoteric products that people look for? Do I have furniture? Blah, 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 right? That is width, right? I have a width, and that width is also hierarchical. Do I have enough width in overall what we call super categories, or within each super category, within fashion, do I have enough width in women's accessories, men's accessories, ethnic wear, blah, 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 so on. That's all width. What is depth? Depth is in a given unit of demand, right? We call that a market SKU. I'll talk about that. So for example, let's talk about, let's say Nike shoes for running within 2,000 to 3,000 rupees, right? That is a unit of, that's a demand. So that's what a consumer is looking for. In that, how much depth do I have? How much variety do I have within that one particular product line is selection depth. Because even within, if I'm looking for a Van Heusen dress shirt for formal white, I don't want to see just one of those, right? I want to see a variety. Maybe I want to see 2 or 3 brands. I want to see a variety, and within that, I want to be able to choose, right? And finally, quality, which I'm not going to talk about, but it's a huge, another field by itself in the kind of sciences we work on. But in this talk, we'll first talk about width and then depth. Okay, width, right? Selection width, what does it mean, right? See, the first thing is everybody carries a lot of the what we call the head verticals. Head verticals are the most common that everybody needs to carry: shirt, pant, blah, blah, blah. A certain the 3 or 4 of the big brands in shoes maybe carry Nike and Adidas and so on at that. So there is a basic head selection which everybody carries. Now the question is, how do you build the what you call the tail and torso and tail selection, which is the slightly less bought, but there is still a lot of demand for it, right? How do I build a product that can, on a sort of a scalable way, keep looking, understanding what are the gaps in demand, and keep making sure that that demand is available, right? So that's what this talks about, which is essentially, and we do this using search queries, right? We get around 15-20 million search queries. We can also look at other Google or other search queries, what have you. But we use the search queries, and then using natural language processing would categorize that into a cluster of queries, right? Cluster meaning they all represent that particular unit of demand, right? And once you identify those, then you look at in those demands, what are being satisfied by our platform and what are not, right? And one good way to do is look at click-through rates, right? So if you find a set of clusters whose click-through rates are less than half of, I'm just giving you a random number. There's a little bit more sophisticated way of doing this, but I'm giving you the intuition behind this, right? Which is whose click-through rates are half of the rest of the mean of the cluster, then that means that somewhere there is a huge demand, there is a good demand for this, but it's not being satisfied, right? So then you identify these clusters, and then you build a seller intelligence portal where, based on a seller affinity score or a seller affinity model, you push these insights to various sellers saying that, hey, this is something people are looking for in our platform, and if you keep it, you may be able to sell it and grow your business. So that's essentially how an example of how width is built using data-driven products, right? Now, if you look at selection depth, and this is a little bit more complicated. This is essentially saying, so here I've given a few definitions, right? This is for the heads. I talked about tail and torso selection. This is for the head selection. This is for the selection where everybody carries, you need to carry a lot of variety. For example, a Nike shoe. People come here, Nike basketball shoe. They don't want to see one Nike basketball shoe. If somebody's looking for a Nike basketball shoe, I want to see enough variety there, and I want it to be in my platform, right? So here we define something called a market SKU, which is the most granular unit of demand, right? See, for example, if you're looking for a Nike basketball shoe, this is how a consumer looks for it. The consumer is not looking for more often than not, right? They're not looking for a particular shoe. They come in with a need which is saying Nike basketball shoe in the 2000 to 2500 price range. Then they start searching. So this is the core. This is the sort of the bottommost, I would say, unit of demand. Okay, so this is the level at which I need to solve the product assortment problem. Okay, so now the question, that is a market SKU. Then threshold is what is the minimum number of styles I need for that market SKU, which means how many types of Nike basketball shoe in the 2000 2500 range do I need, right? This is the second question to be asked, right? So how do you determine this? This is another problem, right? So first, what we do, let me quickly go through it, because I don't think the purpose is to go very deeply into it. But first, build a predictive model that can just forecast demand for Nike basketball shoe, right? It will be a function of a whole bunch of things, number of styles, discount, seasonality, product rating, blah, 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 bunch of things, right? There are hundreds of attributes that drive that, right? Then you build a model and you feel comfortable about your ability to build. So this was for a brand, Brown Loafers mass, right? There's an out of time prediction saying, hey, I'm able to predict sales really well, okay? Now what I do is, as I look at it, I improve selection. So I start plotting for increased number of sales, increased number of styles, how does the demand look? And typically what you will get is a S-shaped curve, right? You start building that, right? What it says essentially is, if you have too few styles, the demand does not pick up. People don't buy. They don't feel like they have enough variety in this platform to actually make a choice and a decision to buy. At some level, that suddenly picks up. Usually these are S-shaped curves. And at some point, you see that, okay, the number of styles, if you increase, in this case, beyond 11 or 12 styles of this Brown Loafers, suddenly people start considering this as a serious destination for this product and start buying. And at some level of choice, it becomes too much choice beyond which they don't care. You can have more, but they really don't care. For example, I could be looking for a Van Heusen full shirt formal. Maybe I want to see 5 or 6 types, but I don't care whether there are 3000 types or 200 types or whatever. Somewhere between 10 types is more than enough for me. That's what this is, right? These are two different products. So this is how that is productized. So based on this, you again build what is the right selection, when is it too much selection, when is it too little selection, where do you need to add selection, so on, so on. Right? Another problem statement, another quick one, and then we'll just take questions, right? Another problem statement was, like we said, right, from during the purchase user experience. One of the key parts of the purchase user experience is having good reviews, right? So when I say good reviews, it is not reviews which say great things about the product. That's not what I mean by good reviews. We are a platform. We want people to have the choice to buy what product they want. Good review means reviews that describe the product as authentically and as detailed a manner as possible. Yeah. Older days, see, when earlier, before we built this algorithm, we just used upvotes as a sort of a measure of quality of reviews. What we realized is upvotes is not a very good sort of measure of quality of reviews. It says things like good product or waste of money or whatever, right? It's not very informative. It doesn't talk a lot about the product itself. And because 10 other people found it to be good or found it to be a waste of money, they would just upvote it or downvote it and so on. So that's not very useful. So the problem statement is you need to have a product that is able to sort of a review that is able to give you a lot of relevance about the product, talks about various product features, compares it with other products, so on and so forth. It should have a lot of depth. Maybe it should be structured, have pros and cons. It should mention experiences with the product and so on. And other things like it should not contradict itself. Reviews and ratings should you can't give a rating of 1 and say it's an amazing product and it served all these purposes, or you can't give it a rating of 5 and just ding the product and so on, right? So there should be some consistency there so that you know the authenticity of the review. So then we built a model. Rather than go through this, I'll go into what it does, right? So basically it extracts, goes to the catalog, extracts out vertical attributes of the product from the catalog, because the catalog will already have that product. And based on that, so this is for a phone, right? A mobile phone. It extracts out a cluster, seats, display, battery, capacity, warranty, camera, picture, so on and so forth. And then we use ML technique like called word2vec, where you also start extend the seed list of the clusters. Picture it could be called image, pics, photo, IMG, photo, so on. Service could be logistics, shipment, delivery speed, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And so these could be some of the extensions of the seed list of cluster, right? And then you start extracting from the reviews text descriptions, right? Adjectives and so on of the cluster, right? For these clusters, right? Excellent in service, bad camera, or good Wi-Fi connectivity, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? And then you start building for each of the theme clusters cluster phrases. So these are some examples, right? Picture quality, blur image, photo, optical image, good service, service center, great packaging. Bring this, right? And then you start assigning weights for each one of these cluster phrases, right? And the weights are assigned by looking at the entire corpus of reviews for the product and seeing what is mentioned more, what do consumers talk about more. Based on that, you build a weight. And once you build that weight, you can actually, and then there are some few small nuances, right? You don't want product review talking about the same thing again and again. You don't want it talking 10 times about battery, but nothing else, right? Or so on, right? So then you give a decay for some of these things. If a product feature is being repeated again and again, you don't want to double count it. You give a decay function and so on and so forth. And similarly, things like pros and cons or things that you feel are good signals of a review, you sort of give them some additional weight. Yeah. So finally, based on that, you build this, and this is for a mixer juicer grinder, and you would start ranking reviews based on this quality. And what we do with that is, when you look at a product page, the reviews, the first 2 or 3 reviews you see on the right will be the ones that scored well. So which means that the reviews that you read will have a little bit more, be a little bit more relevant and so on and so forth. And with this, you're able to improve your units per visit, reviews per PPV's product page view, and so on and so forth. So you start building better conversions because people are finding more useful information, which will help them make decisions about the product. Yeah. So these were some of the things that I wanted to talk about. So my example use cases, like I mentioned, are over. I wanted to maybe spend a few. So one of the things I asked me to talk about was what are the skill sets in building a data team, an analytics team, and so on. So I'll talk for a few minutes about that, and maybe we can just make it more sort of interactive after that, right? See, I look at my team, if I look at 3 or 4 different personas, right? The first persona is the leader, right? And I'm just not talking just about myself, but my direct staff is also a set of leaders who manage large chunks of business, analytics for large chunks of business. So what do you need in these people, right? What you need is deep domain and business understanding, because this is a team that will work very closely with product leaders. This will be work very closely with business leaders and so on. So for this group, business and product understanding is very, very, very important. These guys should think like business leaders or product managers and so on and so forth. And that's the thinking. That's very important. Well, followed by the other really important thing is technical depth, because the team they are managing a technical team, and very often if you look at employee NPS, they rate their manager. One of the things that we have seen that they rate the manager very strongly is on their ability to provide technical depth and technical guidance. This third thing is very important to an analytics organization, particularly, is what I call quant intuition. It is different from when I talked about technical depth. What I mean by technical depth here is not engineering, but more science, which is understanding statistics, machine learning, techniques, methodologies, so on and so forth. That's what I meant by technical depth. But the quant intuition is something very different, and which is probably among all of these things, right, I feel is one of the most important attributes of a leader in this field, which is having a very sharp understanding of what data means. What are the biases? Where could there be biases in data? What does this data really mean? That quant intuition is very crucial for any data leader. This is probably the most, I cannot understate it. This is something whenever I interview, I test a lot for, because that's, I think, a non-negotiable thing. And obviously then leadership, which is true for any leader, right? Ability to motivate people, train, be articulate, all of those things, take tough decisions, all of those things, right? Then the analyst. Analyst should be very sharp in business understanding, should have some technical depth as a user. Maybe not, they don't read papers in machine learning, so on and so forth, but fundamentally have a good understanding of random forest or logistic regression or whatever, right? Some technical depth, understanding data, and quant intuition again is very important here. Then you have the scientist, right? These should be your top-notch technical talent, very deep understanding of machine learning, very deep understanding of building scalable systems, machine learning, and so on and so forth, and some business understanding, so that they look at data the right way and they build the kind of models that create true tangible value once productized, right? And then the last one here, but a very important one actually, is the data analyst, data engineer. And the difference is data engineers are a little bit more on the engineering side. Data analyst is more on the querying and working with large data sets. Both should be able to work with large data sets, but I don't expect an analyst to build consumption pipelines from data platforms, so on and so forth, more querying and so on. But broadly, these two with a lot of technical depth and practical hands-on experience. So this is what a team looks like. Now I'm done with my prepared part of the conversation. I don't know how you want to take it forward, Sai.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I think you've beautifully picked the most relatable use cases and walked us through each and every step, especially, after explaining the measurement. I've been making some notes: measurement science, and then data assisted human decisions, data assisted machine decisions, and then pick those two examples which are most relatable to all of us, and then went through those stages, right? Without, of course, getting into too much technical details. It's digestible, and it gives a glimpse into what goes on in making some of those decisions that as a consumer we trivialize, right? Or we probably ignore. And there is a lot of stuff that's going on. So there are several questions coming in. But before we get to that question, I think there's one important thing that I've caught, and maybe I will want to get your perspective on that. So here you mentioned about, feature A does this, feature B doesn't do this. So there is always this this decision that need to be made by the teams. It could be a product manager or anybody to say, we want to build this feature because we believe that it can bring in this benefit, right? And that includes data, that includes data science. Now, the challenge that I've heard most of the people, and there are some challenges on getting those features approved, right? So for example, in your team, there is somebody who needs to make that decision whether yes or no, right? Now, what is the biggest challenge in getting such features approved, right? Before you answer that, I think it'll be good to take a poll from the audience to see what they think of this. Right. So, let's see what audience thinks in terms of what could be the biggest challenge in getting a particular data science feature approved. I'm sure many of them are in this situation, have gone through this situation at some point in time. So, and then you can give your point of view, how your organization deals with this. I'm assuming you are able to see the.
Yeah, I'm able to see that. I'm just looking at this lack of clarity, lack of tangible business revenue projection. Management team doesn't understand the nuance enough to appreciate the risks. Lack of confidence. Pull this off. Okay. So should I answer or what should I?
Please go ahead. I think I keep encouraging people to give their views and perspectives, but please go ahead.
As a data guy, this is fascinating to see. So part of my mind is trying to calculate what this is saying while I'm trying to answer this. So see, I think if you ask me, I will talk to you a little bit about Flipkart. Right? Flipkart is a very, very, very data and quant savvy and quant oriented company, right? So the last thing I would say is management team doesn't understand nuances of data science to appreciate the risk. I don't think that
that's not an issue for
I'm
you.
not seeing. I have not seen that as an issue for me. And for me, if that's a very almost a deal breaker. So for me, I don't know how to deal with that because that's a more dealing. That's a different conversation.
Right, but imagine companies trying to set up the data organizations. And the top-down leadership just want to do it because it's the thing to do now, right?
Yes. See, that's a very difficult problem to solve. I don't know how you will solve it. The way I would solve it is I would try not to be in a company where that happens, right? To be honest, right? Because I think no, and I'm not. It's not even a joke. I'm very serious, right? I think it is very clear because if you are in today's world, if you're in a company that is fundamentally questioning or not understanding the value of data, then you have to question the likelihood of success for that company, actually, right? So some of the other things, how do you some of the other, can you go back to that thing?
So alternatively, your challenge in sense your organization or your team.
So for us, the challenge is not even there was one on revenue impact and so on and so forth, right? Typically, we have always been able to figure out some way to build a proxy for the revenue impact, whether it is, right? So maybe it's a block on certain accounts, right? So we will build a model and figure out what is the incremental revenue. We call it the revenue breakage. What is the incremental revenue you lose by blocking this set of the possible fraudulent customer, and what is the sort of incremental benefit of that, because they will end up returning or breaking the product and giving it back, or taking a mobile and giving an old mobile and calling it a return. So these are this is an example. This is a data science product, right? So the ROI is fairly good because we're clear, because offline we'll model it, understand what the precision and recall is, and based on that we will say, okay, this is likely to happen. This is so many is false positive. Based on that, I will make an estimate of what will be my revenue break, what is my revenue loss in the times where I blocked the wrong person, and what is and you'll be able to fairly well articulate that, right? Where the challenges often come are in prioritizing multiple of these things from a perspective of other ancillary impacts, right? So I will see there is something like called a sort of, some companies have this a global hold. See, I'll put a model and how long should I run this? Should I run this versus that? See, always what happens is there will become a plethora of choices, right? Of experiments you can run. Narrowing them to 2 or 3 choices that actually you can use resources to build is probably the biggest challenge you would usually find, right? I think it is shrinking the various possible things to build to a small set of 2 or 3, which will be the most promising for this, is the biggest challenge we usually.
Okay. Super. So there are a few questions that are coming up, especially from Rohit Nagpal and Sumit Garg, and from Experience Flow, Mobi TV. I'm just calling them out so that we are acknowledging that they're asking these questions around metrics, right? And you beautifully explained the hierarchy of metrics, the North Star metrics, the level 0, level 1, level 2, and then the drivers, right? And how you rally the whole company to focus on their metrics so that your North Star metric gets optimized around that.
Yes.
Now, how does one go about setting up and agreeing to these are the L0, L1, L2 metrics? What goes on in defining and agreeing to that? Because that seems like at a very leadership level conversation that
See, I think that's the other thing where we're very fortunate in Flipkart is see, we have a very strong sort of voice in determining everything strategy downwards, right? So for example, if our CEO will have a set of top 20 OKRs, and we put a target, what is the metric and what is the target for each one of those. That becomes the North Star metric, right? For example, right? So this year, these are the top 3 priorities. The North Star metric is very easy. It's
easy,
not something,
from a strategy, and
it's a very strategy, right? For example, I want to sort of grow my, my focus is acquiring customers in the tier 3 plus cities, tier 2 plus cities. That's a North Star metric. That's very easy to measure. There's nothing, no rocket science.
Right.
That metric, right? How many customers did you have every month in that? Or my NPS should go up by 5 points, right? That's a North Star metric. So that's very easily done. So that's where we start. Okay. That's a little bit top down, right? That's a little bit top down. Okay. Once you have that, and then there is an iteration process. Once you have that, now we start building our models, right? These are statistical ML models, which will, we will dump all the things. And this is not something you do every year, right? We sat, see, after I joined Flipkart, I sat and we built this thing called a KPI tree, which is essentially building a robust statistical model for every major metric that exists in e-commerce, or many of the major metrics that exist in e-commerce, right? So if it is your North Star metric is growing tier 2 plus city consumer base, then you define what the target is, and then start building a model around what drives it. So for tier 2 plus, what's your penetration? What's your ability to serve? Do you have your logistics arms in these cities? That's a driver. What is the speed you can offer? What is the service level promise of speed you can offer? What are the kind of product? What is your selection? All of these become input drivers to that one metric, right? So then you start building a model. You start building a model of what is the relative importance of this. For example, for customer experience, we built a model, and what we realize is for certain cohort in the customer experience model, you're being your delivery speed. For example, a very seasoned e-commerce savvy consumer base, speed of delivery is probably one of the most important drivers of customer experience. And this comes up, and then there are other things, right? For a new customer base in tier 2 plus, product quality is the most important driver of customer experience, because they lack trust in e-commerce because they have never shopped in e-commerce, right? So I'm just giving you one example, but these are large models with hundreds of attributes which are built, which will give you what is for every customer cohort for a North Star metric, what is the relative importance of different metrics, and based on that you build your
so clearly the level of maturity of using this, building models, statistical models or whatever for every metric that you want to use to drive your North Star metrics in a
Yes.
data maturity organization like Flipkart is what you explained. But outside the context of Flipkart, let's say if somebody is trying to use data informed decisions, right? And
Correct.
they as you said, coming up with a North Star is a function of strategy, leadership decision, or whatever your business want to focus on in that particular year. Now, is it typically a top-down discussion with leaderships from all teams coming together and saying, here is the metric that we want to improve, which indirectly or directly improves the North Star metric? Is that typically the...
Yeah, see, it's like that part is like any other company, right? There is some board guidance. There is a very small group of leaders who will sort of say that at the end of the day, we would come out with saying that this is the strategy for the company for the coming year. And based on that, the North Star metrics will automatically fall out. And one thing our CEO does every cycle beginning is he publishes his top. So based on those discussions, he publishes his top, say 10 or so OKRs. And that becomes the guiding principle for the company to build the North Star. And then we get on to building the North, sort of the metrics related to that and the targets related to that, and then start this process. Now to answer your earlier question, yeah, we spent almost a year, my entire team I joined Flipkart in around 2014 or so. I think around 2015, middle end or so, I started building this KPI tree, building causal models for everything. It took us almost 2 quarters. That was all my OKR was, building statistical and ML causal model for everything, right? Every company doesn't do this, or they may eventually do this, may not. But even before that, it's not like decisions were not data driven. But
of course.
the same L0 metrics always exist. Every company should have it. I don't think resources or anything should be an excuse for a company not having its North Star L0 metrics in this day and age. But from that L0 metrics, you can use more of a common sense kind of a thing, right? I don't need to build a very sophisticated, the kind of models I talked about, say for NPS, right? You kind of know in e-commerce, delivery speed is important. You kind of know that customer care is important. You kind of, so you look at those metrics and maybe build a simple regression to relate that to NPS and start figuring out how do you control these other input drivers.
Got it. That I think simplifies understanding of that.
Yeah.
So I'm there are several questions on the personas that you talked about, and we'll probably pick one question, and I'll try to include a few questions that are coming up, right? So you mentioned in terms of the personas, there is a leader, there is an analyst, there is a data analyst, there is a data scientist, and data engineer. So this is what I call them as typically data wizards team, right? And then there is a role, a person who plays this role, which manages the people in the team, manages the projects that this team is working on, and interfaces with the business leadership team, right? Which you explained could be the analyst as a persona. But is there a, I don't know about what Flipkart, but what we've heard in the last few days and people is, this is called data science manager or manager of a data science team and products. It's not just managing people, which includes managing the data team, but more importantly, understanding the business impact outcomes, translating them into data projects, and vice versa, which is communicating the ROI, communicating the progress, and all of that. Is that role critical in Flipkart? Which and what do you call that title, if you will?
Absolutely, that role is critical, right? And that is, we don't call it data science manager because in our company, when you call somebody a data scientist, that person is predominantly a scientist. Okay, and there is a very deep expectation of technical depth and literally publishing papers or reading a lot of papers, understanding state of the art, and that's the scientist function that we have defined. These could be two kinds in my team. One is the analytics manager, business analytics manager, and we call the other one is a TAM, right, which is a technical analytics manager. The technical analytics manager is a little bit more of a problem solver, a little bit deeper technically. The business analytics manager is much more of sort of business partner plus a good understanding of analytics and so on, right? But
Okay.
the point that when I call a leader there, right? See, I have personas. I didn't break it down to different levels. See, when I call a leader can be me, it can be my staff, or it can be the managers who are part of their staff and so on. Right? So,
but
all
this role you're saying is critical. Now, the reason why I brought that phrase is lots of companies seems to call some, in fact, McKinsey calls it as very interesting data science translators. I'm not sure why that terminology, but lots of companies seems to add this title called data science managers, which is an interlock role here between the leadership team, business teams, and product team, as well as the data team.
So I'll tell you the role. In Flipkart, we are not big on titles, so I don't know what to call it, and I haven't given it any thought. But what that role is, and that's a very important role in the company. And when I call the leader persona, that is kind of what I say, right? There's the leader persona at my level. I interface with the rest of the leadership team in Flipkart. Then there's the leader persona at my next level, which interfaces with different business units leadership. And then there is the managers who interface with the rest of the thing. But the role is very much the same. It's a very deep understanding of the domain, at the same time being technically deep as well, because the deep domain understanding gains them the respect of the business or the product teams, and the deep technical understanding gets them the respect of their own teams, right?
Exactly.
So between this, then the point is, they should be able to talk business and product the way the product manager or the business manager talks that, and at the same time come back to their team and be able to translate that to a very critical role, and probably one of the most important.
I think that's exactly what we have heard from other leaders as
it's
well.
It's a very important role.
Very important. Great. I think, in the interest of time, I want to acknowledge a few names that, people have been asking questions. And if you later on, if you can find some time and if you can do that, please use that thread to give quick responses to them.
Sure.
But Himansh, Mehul Kumar, Srini, Srivatsa, Bhupesh from Cummins, lots of interesting, questions from different companies. But with that, let me just, thank you again so much, Ravi. Just before you go, 30 seconds into, let me announce, the winner for the best question. I think it goes to Srini GE for asking. In fact, you answered that question right just now. Let me just start sharing my screen and then we can move on. Right. Thanks and congratulations, Srini. Your gift will be on your way. And, take folks in the audience, please take a few seconds, click, scan that code, give us feedback on what went right, what we could do better. This is the only way these conferences can improve and bring in more actionable insights. I'm blown away by the insights that I've learned today. Thank you so much again, Ravi. And in appreciation, here's a digital certificate of appreciation for you from all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.
Thank you. And folks, we have just one more session. I think this is going to be a very interesting one. Again, Doyen in the field of analytics in India, Deep Thomas. Deep is Chief Data and Analytics Officer of Aditya Birla Group. But before we get to that, Sonal, if you could bring up that feedback poll, we'll spend about 20 seconds to give that feedback on the last session. Folks, again, do spend some time to give this. This is very useful and important for us. And we'll take about 3 minutes break before we start with our session. I think we are on time so far. So thanks for staying. One more incredible session to go.
Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to the day 4 of Product Leadership Festival 2020 Data Edition. Thanks a lot for joining us today, and before we get on to our last session of the evening, I would like to introduce our host of the evening, Mr. Sai Satish Vedam. Sai is a senior faculty and an executive coach at Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Director of Product Management at Oracle. Welcome, Sai.
Thank you, Sonal. Good evening again, folks. For those of you who are continuing with the sessions, and for those of you who are joining us, this is the day 4 of Product Leadership Data Edition. And before we get into I introduce the session host as well as the speaker who will introduce the speaker. Just a few words about the festival itself and the organization that is hosting this. Product Leadership Festival, there are 3 editions: product, data, and design. Is organized and hosted by Institute of Product Leadership. IPL started in 2012 as an organization that designs and delivers programs to help senior technology managers and working professionals to transform their careers or transition their careers into product leadership roles. Right, as you know, in 7.5 years of the journey, IPL has worked with various universities and continue to work with organizations, corporates, and the community to build, design, and deliver these programs to help senior professionals transition into it. There are several programs, including an executive MBA program and digital programs as well. So feel free to check, go to the website and look at those things. Now, there is a vibrant community, of product leaders, aspiring product professionals as part of this journey of IPL. And on the 5th day, which is tomorrow, the speakers from the community have nominated some interesting topics to talk. So please go ahead, scan the QR code, vote for the topic. And if the speaker and the topic gets shortlisted to speak, you will get some amazing prizes. Right? Scan the QR code or click the link that is posted on the chat box and go ahead and take that step. There's also another quick thing that you could do is, do some, there's a leaderboard that is created. And if you scan this, it'll take you to that and you can click, perform certain simple actions and you get some points. The top leader of the leaderboard will get an exclusive 30-minute one-on-one discussion with an industry executive around career counseling and career coaching. So do take advantage of that opportunity. For every session we've been having in the last so many days, every session has a dedicated LinkedIn thread where you can go and post those questions and ask those questions, right? So it helps us continue the conversation even after the festival is over. It helps the speakers to go and answer them that could not be answered here. So take a moment, scan that code, and jump right away to that LinkedIn thread and ask your questions. I'm really appreciative, and it's heartening to see so many questions and really good questions coming in from all of you in the previous session. Please continue to do that. I would request you to refrain asking these questions in the chat box because it's hard to monitor. With that, today I'd like to introduce you and welcome again Mr. Pinkesh Shah. Pinkesh is a senior faculty at Institute of Product Leadership. He's also a ex-global vice president of McAfee, who is also an amazing mentor for many of you who know him. Pinkesh, can we have you on video and see if we can see you?
Absolutely. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, great, awesome. Thanks for joining, Pinkesh. I would request you to introduce our guest speaker today for the next session, and then facilitate the session going forward. Thank
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Sai. And what an amazing marathon session that we've had today, starting at 7 from Girish, the VP at Freshworks, to Ravi, head of analytics, and now for the big bang close, it is my proud privilege to introduce Deep. Deep, if you are on the call, can you please turn your video on so we can also see you? Excellent. Deep, is a visionary that needs no introduction. However, for those who haven't met him or haven't seen him, Deep Thomas is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Aditya Birla Group. He's in charge and leading just about all of their AI-led digital transformations, helping multiple divisions to kind of enable their operational efficiencies, drive new business, deliver successful outcomes, all the way from cement to a mobility business at Aditya Birla. So it's a fairly large, broad, wide charter that he runs. It is absolutely a privilege to host him today here at the festival. A world-reputed analytics expert, a thought leader, a passionate evangelist of data science for the last 25 years. So please join me in welcoming Deep. Deep, if you can say something, we can know that we can hear you well as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super. Before Aditya Birla, Deep was also the founder and CEO of Tata Insights and Quants, the acclaimed Tata Group's big data decision science company. He's had various roles in the United States and in India with HSBC, with American Express. So here's someone who who has been working for the last 30 years or so dedicatedly in this field of data science. Even though it's only a few years now that we've been talking about this as the buzzword here, somebody who's been kind of profoundly pioneering this space. And I can go on and on with the illustrious personality that I'm hosting here today, but we'd rather leave some time for him to share the insights and inspire the community. So with that, all yours, Deep.
Thank you so much, Vikesh. Thank you. And thank you for all the kind words, and thank you for having me participate in this forum. I just want to quickly check if I can be heard clearly.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Firstly, kudos to you and the Institute for keeping the students up and running. I am quite impressed and mesmerized by the spirit of or the yearning for learning that the students have. They're close to 170 students right now in this forum, or 170 students or aspirants of data science. I thought after Ravi's session, we will see a large drop in the number of participants. Perhaps, the receding that I would experience would be faster than the hair that receded from my hairline. But,
I
but
don't think
I'm
so.
glad to see that.
And even if they are leaving, I'm pretty sure they're going to be going and implementing all the actionable insights we're going to be giving here right here. So
all right,
excited.
and I'm sure Pinkesh must have told you, for the students that are joining this session, you're getting a straight A in data science whenever that course is going to be launched. Okay? So and this is the session. If you can follow whatever is being told in this session, then you don't need any other session. Okay. So with that on the note, and a big thank you for choosing me over Corona or any other libation that you would have had. Let me start, with this session. Let me just put up my presentation to check if you can all see it. Are we good?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So we wanted to start with the resplendent slide, as resplendent as the opportunity that data science has to offer. What I would like to do is to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes to just share with you on why future-proofing your career in AI is something that I am underscoring today. What I would like to do is to share with you the numerous applications of data science and AI in today's world, before the pandemic and now more so with the advent of pandemic, and what would happen to businesses and the world around us, and perhaps leave with a few thoughts on what will it take for one to pursue and have a successful career in data science, and then towards the end we can take a few questions. All right. So with that, let me just start with the very first slide. Contrary to the belief that this is new and kicking, or a field which is 30 to 50 years old, I'm sure some of you may be aware of, but this is one of the most this is one of the oldest profession, if I were to say. The first incidence of the use of forecasting was dated in 500 BC, and the father of data science, and of course you got to know where the roots come from, so this is one for the trivia and for you to boast with your friends. The father of data science is Thales of Miletus. He is considered to be one of the 7 wise men of Greece, and this was way back in 500 BC, where he used data to predict olive oil demand. And as you know, way back in those period, olive oil was considered to be, the monopoly, the number one monopoly. And he used, a lot of astronomical data and mathematical models, specifically around forecasting techniques, to predict the olive oil demand and rent the olive oil press so that, he could make a lot of money. So that's the first application. Of course, he used knowledge for money, which is a separate topic, but that's the first application of data science, which goes back to 500 BC. But interestingly, the amount of data that was available to Thales was this much. The amount of data that is available to us is this big. And I'm probably still not quantifying the sheer amount of data that is available to us as organizations, which can present a mammoth opportunity for organizations to mine and command not only superior business performance, but superior valuations as well. And very recently, we saw the interest of one of the large social networking business platforms, globally renowned, making a fairly large investment in a large Indian telco player. And that just shows the amount of data that the Indian telco player has and how they are looking at monetizing it, wherein global social networking giants are also expressing interest. So that's what we're talking about. And essentially, what we're seeing around us is that the most valuable brands, have data at the heart of their strategy. You've got the likes of the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, apart from Uber, which recently is going through a little bit of a slump. I think all of the other four that are here in this list have seen, somewhere around $20 to $100 billion of increased valuation over the course of the last 6 to 7 months. Most on Netflix now, with more people being restricted to home and looking at content through Netflix. Whether it is the semantic search that Google has, or the recommender systems that Amazon and Netflix uses, or the route optimization, or the scoring mechanisms to match the demand and the supply that Google uses, or looking at intent and profiling, or segmentation approaches to provide the content to the people in Facebook. Every single organization here is using some form of data science in order to create the differentiation, that personalization, and the superior experience to command this kind of valuation. Okay, and what has essentially happened, as I said earlier, look, the science is not new. This has been going on for decades and centuries. But over the course of the last 100 years, as you know, there have been four very important, as I would call it, the nexus of forces that have come together. First, of course, the hardware cost has fallen precipitously. What used to cost hundreds of dollars in order to save a GB of data is literally costing you less than $1. And cost of all these components, whether it is sensors, chips, accelerometers, have witnessed really steep drops. And it is now affordable for a large organization, a mid-sized organization, or a smaller organization to now capture millions and millions of information pertaining to the operations of the process, or even information pertaining to transactions or interactions with their customers and what have you. Software has become more advanced than ever, as you can see. Not only do you have the open source, but ability to create various modules through Agile and open network now allows organizations to tap into advancements in computer science for massive processing and speed. Third, of course, which is bringing it all together, is the connectivity, whether it is the connectivity amongst humans to humans, or connectivity between amongst machines through IoT. Each of this connectivity through the digital platform allows massive amount of information to be captured and generated. And the last but not the least is the erstwhile investment that were made by organizations through on-prem solutions no longer are necessary, because organizations can just get their infrastructure up and running, pay as you go through cloud, which offers scale and flexibility. So these four technological changes has now led to a massive amount of data, and as this data has been generated, so our organization is starting to look at different aspects of their consumers, of their operations, of their businesses, to help make meaningful decisions, meaningful insights, which can give them that competitive advantage, right? And I'm sure presenters before me would have covered, but this is just the basic, the 4 V's of data, of big data. The volume, which is the shared globs and globs information now is available. the speed with which this information is available, whether it is the credit card transaction, which which generates data in matter of minutes or hours, depending on your shopping habits, or it is information which is captured in seconds or microseconds, depending on the sensors that are captured on your machines, or it could be information that is captured and is transient by hours and days, looking at interactions that you may have with your customers, either offline or online. Of course, this information is available in various shapes and forms. Earlier, the transaction or the data was available largely in structured form and through what we used to call RDBMS. Now, with advent of NoSQL and other ways of storing databases, we have the ability to capture various forms of information, whether it is the image, let's say an image that is captured of an X-ray, or it could be an image that is captured of an instrument, or a video feed, or a voice call that is captured between you and your customer, or a web blog, or a Twitter feed that is captured in your interaction with your customers, or the standard point of sales transactions. So information comes in various shape and forms. And then the last piece is the veracity, which is the ability to distinguish between, I would say in colloquial terms, the good data and bad data. So these are more the characteristics of the data. But what's the one V which is actually driving the valuations of the companies that keep data at the heart of the strategy? And that is essentially the value. It is the value that organizations are able to mine out of this information that helps them deliver superior results. And the reason is very simple, and it's quite intuitive, right? Data does not have any relations. Data actually does not have any egos. Data allows an organization to have a very transparent view and give you the facts. And if mined well, it tells you, what are the risks and the opportunities, which allows the organization to make decisions faster. And if everybody in the organization, right from the top to the person who's making the decision in the operation floor, is connected and in sync with the data that is being made, the decision that is being made, chances are that you are going to make decisions much faster. You'll be able to have a much faster time to market. So if you're making better decisions, if you're making faster decisions, the chances are that you will have a much higher superior performance as well. So it is seen that companies that use data or mine data, are in a position to make decisions 5 times faster, 3 times quicker, and are twice as more likely to sit in the top quartile of the financial performance than the others. So organizations that are performing superior than the others do have, data analytics or data science or AI at the heart of their strategy. And when we say data science, essentially it's a very simple thing. You have data which could be either coming from internal sources, which is all the data that you have, or external data, which is information that is publicly available, information that is available through data brokers or organizations that are in the business of monetizing data, or data which can be made available through partnerships in an ecosystem play. And all of this information, through combination of varied form of advanced analytics and AI, would allow organizations to derive meaningful insights and make smarter decisions. And as I said earlier, if you're making smarter decisions and quicker decisions, likelihood of you to perform better is much higher. And all of this is important to reside on the bedrock of infrastructure. I should mention the aspect of consent and privacy, and it cannot be possible without having the right kind of talent and a spirit of curiosity and innovation culture. So this essentially is the magic equation, right? If you have the good data which is comprehensive, which is of high quality, which is timely, which is accurate, and you apply smart analytics, which is the business acumen that is required to understand the business problems, the KPIs, and the science to mine the information more effectively, chances are that you would be able to generate superior business value for the organization. And that's why having the right infrastructure, which is cost effective, the right talent, which understands the application and the use of this data, and someone who can continuously challenges the status quo and brings in elements of innovation and disruption, are the ones that help organizations succeed. If you look at the examples, if you go to any MD or CEO of an organization and say, look, I can help you use data science to increase revenue, reduce your cost, improve customer experience, mitigate risk, identify new revenue streams, identify new business models, I can tell you 100 out of 100 MDs and CEOs will say, that's all I care about. There's nothing else. because at the end of the day, these are the only things that the MD is looking at. Of course, there are other aspects of the goodwill, the reputation, and responsible leadership. But when it comes to business performances, each of these 6 things are very important. And what you're seeing here are the first 4, which is revenues, expenses, experience, and risk, which are more geared towards the actual value, which is the performance, the financial performance of your organization. And these are fundamental to drive the valuation of the company. Because if you don't show value in terms of revenue growth or operational efficiencies, or customer experience or risk mitigation, chances of you getting valuation will be very, very low. So you get the value first. And then as part of valuation, you also use AI and experimentation to identify new revenue streams and new business models. And we'll touch upon each of these as an example. So let's look at the first one, which is increasing revenues. I'm just giving an example of 2 organizations, DirecTV and Trulia. DirecTV, as some of you may know, is in the business of content, satellite content, which is prevalent in US. And one of the things that they did was partner with USPS. USPS is United States Postal Service, and they created a quid pro quo, a data exchange, to understand who are the people that are moving into a particular location, so that rather than sending generic offers to everybody saying that you get your first month off, they actually had more personalized campaigns around the profile of the people that are moving in. You're focusing on that kind of content which will resonate best, with those people. And because the content, or because the campaigns are more personalized and which was more resonating with the people that are moving in, they saw much higher subscriptions. Similarly, Trulia, which is into the real estate business, they realized that as people are looking into real estates and making decisions on homes, one of the things that was important for them was to understand the crime index. And this is where they partnered with external sources to create a utility in their own website to help people understand what was the crime index related to a particular property. So people were able to make more judicious decisions on what was the investment they had to make, depending on their budget. Again, that was a value proposition that attracted the customers or prospective buyers into their website. They were again increasing their ability to generate more revenue. So these are just 2 examples of how organizations are using data to enhance revenue. Now, there are many other examples. For example, on the left-hand side, you're seeing organizations that earlier used to provide services around energy are now providing insights which are helping consumers manage their utility costs more effectively. The one in the middle is an example of US Cellular, where US Cellular is allowing sensors which are put in the farmland to capture the quality of the crop to be pushed into cloud, and then have US Cellular provide recommendations in terms of the pesticides, the fertilizers, the humidity, the water content, the soil quality, and anything that is required in order to help the farmers improve the crop yield. The third one is an example from John Deere, which is a traditionally 100-year-old company which was in the business of making tractors, and now they have sensors that are powering these tractors, which are not only capturing information pertaining to the use and the effectiveness of the tractors, which can provide them provide alerts to John Deere if the tractor requires service, but they also capture information pertaining to things related to the agricultural land, which again provides information back to, or value-added information back to the farmers, where they're able to increase the yield. Again, information where the combination of digitization, which is the ability to capture data, and science, which is digitalization, is helping organizations enhance the value-added services to increase revenue. So that was the first one. So you've got the CEO happy that I'm going to help you increase revenue. What about cost? The second one is an example from UPS, and of course UPS is one of the largest logistics company in the world, with I think over 300,000 trucks and over 150 to 200 different countries. I think they clock anywhere around 100 million miles, and it is important for them because every percentage saved, whether it is on the route that a driver is traversing, which has a direct impact on the cost of the fuel that is being used, and then also has an impact on the SLA for them to deliver, or it is looking at just the performance of the vehicle, which also increases the longevity of the truck, or reduces the number of accidents and calamities that a driver may go through. All of this is information that is available to UPS, now, whether it is driver's behavior, delivery pickup time, fragility of the stock, the vehicle capacity, so that they can optimize the right vehicle for the right shipment, the package dimension, the trip duration. All of this information is used and mined to provide insights to help reduction in route duration, so that they have faster SLAs, fuel savings, fleet maintenance, and so on and so forth. Similar examples are seen across manufacturing industries. Now, whether it is to improve production performances, people are using data to understand how can they improve the asset life, or even the overall productivity and yield of their produce. Enhance operational excellence, whether it is improving the quality of this using image-based analytics, or as I said earlier, sensor-based techniques, or even improving safety and compliance. What you see here is an image-based approach towards detecting people that are not wearing safety gears, as opposed to actually stationing or manning a person there in the store. Okay, so you've got the revenues, you've got the cost. This is an example of customer experience. Just like you have the largest logistics company, Disney, as they say, is the happiest place on earth. So if you ever get a chance to go to any of the Walt Disney theme park, which God willingly we'll all get to go soon, you would see the amount of data that is being used by Disney in order to provide that magical experience for you and for that little child. And whether it is the information that is captured through wristbands, information that is captured through the app, the information that is captured when you check in, or information that is captured when you're going through different rides. All of this information is used to curate and create that memorable experience, so that whenever you come back, you may have had spent many hours waiting on the line, but it's very rarely do you ever come across a person who comes out of the Disneyland experience and says that it was not one of the best experiences for them. And the secret behind that, again, is the level of curation, personalization that goes into creating that memorable experience. Similar things are now happening in the use of data analytics. Of course, what you see on the right is something that we're experiencing day in and day out through Netflix and other such media content players that are providing content on the basis of our persona, people like us, and what's trending. But you also see examples of people providing recommendations pertaining to your style and your habits, your taste clusters, your preferences. Now, whether it is for beauty and healthcare, or whether it is for food, and so on and on. So wherever you have this information, of course, on the bedrock, as I said earlier, of privacy and consent-based usage of this information, you now have the ability to create the segmented approach to provide that pertinent set of offers, pertinent set of recommendations, and that personalized experience that helps you create a much higher mind recall with your customers. The fourth is around risk, and this is an example from banking. Of course, one of the threat that the banks always have are information that could get marginalized, or could be compromised across the systems, internal communications, external use feeds, or through cybersecurity or cybercrime. And what they do is mine different forms of information to arrive at risk exposure, enterprise risk management, and come up with the right interventions to help reduce the risk or the compromising of this information. And all of these things on the right hand side, whether it is financial or market risk or contractual risk, uses extensive amount of data science in order to do so. Okay. If that is not enough, you also have examples in legal, which is again a fairly large industry in itself. So, U.S. legal market is close to $500 billion, which was one of the later, I would say, users of data analytics. But today, as we look around us, a lot of machine language and natural language processing is being used to optimize various kinds of litigation strategies. You now have information pertaining to courts, the types of cases, the judges and their biases and their responses to different kind of courts, the type of settlements, the trials, and all of these can actually give you a probability of score on how a particular court case would go. And these kinds of information are now used by of course, I'm not too sure if these are used by civil cases, but definitely in corporate cases, to understand what kind of outcome would they see, depending on the kind of litigation, the judge, the location where this case was set up, the trials, and what have you. So the overall success rate, and hence what should be their strategy. As I said earlier, all those things were more around the value, whether it was revenue, cost, experience, risk, and so on. But there are also examples of new product development. As organizations need to continuously innovate, it is important that they also engage their customers and keep them along to help innovate new types of products. And this is an example from Nippon, where there are different forms of digital mechanisms. Here's an example of offline interactive games, or an eye color palette, which is given to the customers, or a smartphone app with AR, which allows Nippon to understand by different customer profiles what kind of preferences they have, what kind of shopping methods would they look at, and depending on their life stages and their value consciousness, also arrive at what could be the demand by color trends, by color palettes, by product types, and so on and so forth, so that they can have the overall R&D and the sales and marketing in sync in order to respond with the right set of products and services. It is also used to create new business models, and this is an example of a toothbrush manufacturing company. And who would have thought that a toothbrush manufacturing company could provide inputs to one of these fast-growing and large-growing dental insurance. Dental insurance in the US is roughly around $30 to $40 billion, and people are so worried about this smile, they keep investing big on dental insurance. So this is a booming industry, and I'm sure that this is also booming in India. But you've got a toothbrush with sensors, which is now capturing information pertaining to individuals in a particular location, their brushing habits, the number of times that they brush, the strokes, whether it is circular or horizontal, and all this information is then used at an aggregate level by Beam to provide information to the dental insurance companies to see how should they go about underwriting. So if you happen to be from a particular location where people have got bad brushing behavior, then chances are you'll end up paying a much higher premium. So that's again an example of how data is being used in terms of building new business models. And that's not only on the consumer side, even on the B2B side. And this is one thing that we are seeing. And I'm sure that a lot of you must have heard things about smart city and smart factories. It's what essentially is smart is the data and the cognitive layer on top of that, whether it is building management, our ability to optimize the amount of resources, whether it is the utility, the water, or even having alerts around fire detection, or ensuring that using the right infrastructure, keeping the balance of environment and the structural health, and whatever is required in terms of mobility and transportation. So creating a new ecosystem where things are more connected through IoT, and then having a cognitive layer which can provide the right recommendations in optimizing the various resources is an example of how data science is helping create new business models and new ecosystems. Okay, so with that, what's new, right? And what has happened in the last 3 months or so has truly been unprecedented. Of course, it is deeply concerning. It's gray, and it feels as if there's no light to the end of the tunnel. While I'm hopeful, and so as I believe that all of you are, that things would prevail, and we'll see better days. This also underscores a huge opportunity for technologies, and more so for data science and AI to play a bigger role. So going back to the point that I made earlier, that if you are looking at future-proofing your career, this is probably the time to look at data science and AI in a career, because what's being seen now, what's being witnessed around us is new trends and new consumer trends. Of course, a lot of us are working remotely. You would see that remote working would become an important part of our lifestyle. So whatever recommendation and personalization is required in terms of ensuring that, or even various mechanisms to ensure that the level of intimacy and connect with the employee and the employer continues to be there, happens. Supply chain is becoming a big area of focus, as you know, that with more localization initiatives, people are now looking at improved supply chains, whether it is to identify the right truck, the right location, the right route, the right size. All of this will now require massive amount of data and data science. Virtual travel, people would be paranoid about going to a store and trying it out. So using, again, a combination of AR, VR, contextualized through an AI engine, which allows you to try something which fits your body type, again, is an element of data science and AI that can be used. Anything which is contactless payment, again, using combinations of blockchain and QR code, again overlaying with the data science to ensure that there is no fraud and there's strong cybersecurity around it. And examples of safety with drones. Drones are capturing massive amount of information in real time. You no need, there may not be a need for a person to be physically present at the site. You could be sitting at your room, the comfort of your room, and monitoring a location because you have drones and a cognitive layer which tells you exactly how the building construction is progressing, if there has been any pilferage, if there's any safety breaches, or for that matter, if there's any intervention that is required in order to speed up or improve the quality of the construction. So all of these things would require a host of technologies, and anytime there is digitization, which is a technology which is connecting all of us, there is generation of data, and whenever there is generation of data, there is a need for the data to be converted into information, to insights, and that insights to eventually wisdom. Okay, so the new normal would be this, but the new normal would also mean that a lot of organizations which historically have been laggards would see massive jump in adoption of AI, of analytics, as is already evident. You're seeing healthcare systems, being the first movers in terms of now usage of digital analytics. A lot of investments has gone in terms of identifying how do we go about controlling similar pandemics in the future. Banking is becoming more contactless. You'll start seeing digital and virtual agents, which is beyond an RM or beyond a private banker. You would see massive amount of focus on animation, on media, on entertainment, and education. Agriculture is an area which would again see, as I said earlier, a lot of investments and usage of data analytics. So there are sectors which historically were using data analytics, which will continue to use it, but we do expect a number of these laggards to now leapfrog the rest of its contemporaries and start using a combination of what you see as data, which is digitization, analytics, which is advanced analytics like optimization, forecasting, and what have you, and machine language and AI. And if you think about us as organizations, I think for me, if I'm representing an organization, I have an ecosystem of three. It's the people, and we got to make sure that whatever we do it by ensuring the safety and the protection of our people. We also ensure that we manage the workflow of people more effectively, and we are mindful of the risks that our people are involved, depending on the location they're in. We are also looking at the communities that we interact with, whether it is the societies or our customers. And lastly, the businesses, the people that we business with, whether it is the customers, the suppliers, or the end consumers. And each of these three, of course, are getting impacted by COVID. And there are numerous applications in AI which should help us manage through this phase, first to rebound, and then to, what I would say, is to resume to normal practices and reimagine or retool ourselves so that we can leapfrog and continue to have the same level of business performances that we were witnessing before the pandemic. And as I said earlier, there are many numerous examples of how AI is being used today, whether it is personalized distance learning. Now, children today are seeing a one-to-many course content, but it could so be possible that going forward, the kids will have the choice to alternate their subjects because the content will be personalized and the level of content will also be personalized depending on the person or the kid's learning ability. You're seeing remote monitoring or remote proctoring. You don't need to actually be in front of the doctor. You will be able to push your vitals through cloud, and you'll have a cognitive layer which will provide the first set of insights on how you are before it gets monitored through a doctor. And I'm sure a lot of us are trying to stay fit through virtual fitness classes. We are seeing AI invigorating the agility across supply chain, whether it is to improve inventory visibility, again using a combination of image and optimization, image analytics and optimization to ensure that you're managing the least amount of inventory that is required and managing your working capital through it, improving cost efficiency through route and network optimization, and overall managing your overall supply decisions by having a good handle on your supply chain, supplier risk, and the overall ecosystem. There is examples of AI in healthcare, whether it is early detection and diagnosis. People are now talking about using a combination of voice, vitals, and eyes, the dilation of the eyes, to also give you early reads and diagnosis of various kinds of illness, which could be the first entry point that could be made available to everybody in the world and could be enabled through your smartphones. So people that are sitting in remote villages and may have access to kiosks or smartphones, but may not have access to doctors, could actually get an opportunity to have early detection and diagnosis of certain life-threatening diseases. Similarly, in the case of telemedicine and remote monitoring, where again it uses massive amount of AI to provide the first layer of cognitive intelligence, or even looking at efficiencies to combat workforce challenges, which is using AI to provide early reads on infection, which our nurses and the hospital staff could be wary of. Okay, this is something that I touched earlier. We would see a big inflection in the mobile and the gaming industry, whether it is the virtual book club, the personalization in the gaming and the media industry, where today people are seeing content on the basis of what their profile is. It could so happen that you may have a cluster and a small community of people, which is you and your friends, and the content would be streamed in a manner where you and your friends could get the same content, so that you can have an offline discussion or perhaps a concurrent discussion while the content is being aired. So there are numerous applications of AI here, in this case NLP or advanced analytics, that recommender systems or collaborative filtering, as I say, which are using concepts to increase the overall experience when it comes to media and entertainment. At the end of it, what we're seeing is hyper personalization or localization, and through a combination of emerging technologies and big data analytics. Okay. If that is not enough, we are seeing the use of analytics even in CSR and sustainability. There are examples of image-based analytics to capture the image, let's say in this case an endangered animal, and then ensure that through drones and other image capturing devices, keep a constant count of the endangered species in a particular location, so that we are on top of any anti-poaching activities, on top of these poaching activities. Similarly, you've got ability to now capture the micropollutants in the air. So you have a device which can convert the micropollutants into data, and that data could tell you the quality of the air, which can actually allow citizens to decide on what are the days that they want to step outside or not, or even allow the government to come up with the right emission curves that are required in order to control the air pollution. And as I said earlier, you've got the smart cities, which is hyperconnection of the various types of devices, which allows the government and the city to plan the infrastructure, the mobility, and the overall lifestyle and the use of utilities across the city. Okay, so I hope that this gives you a sense of the application, the numerous application of AI, and regardless of what stream you choose, whether you're looking at a particular sector which is consumer facing, retail or banking or healthcare, or a sector that is B2B, or you're looking at a back-end role, which is, let's say, operations and supply chain, or a front end, which is customer-facing, sales and marketing, or even looking at fundamental roles such as HR and finance. The application of data science is across the board, right? And what we see is evident, and it's something that Ravi touched upon, is the unprecedented demand for these skills, whether it is data scientists, the product engineers. We would expect a lot of this data science to feed into platforms, and these platforms will help create various products, which are numerous applications that help operationalize the science and the utilities to make it more actionable. So whether it is data science, the product engineers, the solution architects, design thinking, of course, the need for people who understand business and strategy would continue to be the case. And last but not the least, the understanding of the digital medium, because that's one thing which is predominantly becoming second nature to all of us. As I said earlier, I think data science is about the 5 I's. It's about converting information into insights into intelligence or wisdom for the organization, which then fuels innovation, and that innovation with institutionalized across the organization helps create that unique differentiation for the organization. Okay. So what's in it for you? Don't think of this only as a technical career. I do believe that every single individual regardless of the function that he or she pursues or the area that he or she pursues, would require to be either a practitioner who understands how to go about building the right type of analytics or analytics of the algorithms, or the consumer of analytics who understands the applications of these analytics so that he or she could expand the utilization and the value that it could generate. So whether you're a practitioner in the early stage of your career or a lead who is bringing in a sectoral view and how could various applications of AI, ML, advanced analytics could help transform the organization, or a leader which could help organization compete or even stump the competition, uh, I think data analytics is here to stay, or data science as an organization or as a function is here to stay. And what is the code to building these skills? I would just leave it with the A, B, C, D, E. And I tell my team, if you don't have any of these five, you're bound to get an F. So first, of course, is your analytical thinking. You've got to have an ability to think in a manner where you're able to solve the problems. Business acumen is important. If you don't understand the KPIs, the key dimensions and the metrics that will transform the organization, or the processes that are required, the nuts and bolts are required to understand the organization, the data science will just become an academic exercise. Creativity or curiosity is equally important so that you can challenge the status quo and look at experimentation as an approach towards driving these change. The D, of course, is data. If you don't have data which is comprehensive and accurate, you'll not be able to generate as much value. And last but not the least is the need to have that execution rigor. Okay. To summarize, I would leave you with 5 things. Of course, data science is new, and it is a culture which is slowly getting embedded into the organization. But like any other pop culture, it takes time and effort to make it a culture. So a combination of business and the technical acumen is required, and the ability to showcase the results and the value is what will help organizations to keep this as an important and a core and a differentiation for themselves. Value the goldfish in your fish bowl, which what it means is each organization has the data, and what is important is to not go about looking for more data, but first show the value with whatever data that you have, whether it is in a sales and marketing function, or an HR function, or an R&D function. But first value the goldfish, get the value out of it, and then start looking for more information. Third is think big. I think the world is large now, and open innovation allows us to bring in a lot of diverse perspectives from other sectors, from the startup community, from the academia. It is impossible for you to innovate yourself. So think big, think and look at your moonshots. And the bigger the moonshots, more the possibility for you to disrupt and create the distinction. However, as you think big, start small. Because if you don't start small, you will have a large transformation journey which may entail massive amount of investments. Start small, proof of concepts, pilots, which have actionable targets associated with and value associated with it, so that you can rally the whole organization around it. And last but not the least, make sure that whatever you're doing has a value attached to it. So with that, I would wish you all the best and hope that you stay excited and invigorated about the career in data science. Thank you. Over to you.
Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. As I was listening through this and just taking furious amount of notes, I'm sure everybody has been glued. Unlike your prediction, I think we had less than 3% drop off throughout the whole at 9 or 10 p.m. And I think, as they say, the best presenters are those who always answer the questions before they get asked. And I think today was a living example of a very panoramic view of the applications of data science. I think you answered, all the questions that are on people's mind about COVID and kind of what, in the post-COVID world, how would this work, and how would data science kind of come to rescue, in which sectors, in which disciplines, in which models. So I think a very comprehensive, practitioner view, as I'm sure you've lived through this, as well. So truly appreciate that. There's been a ton of questions that I see kind of coming up here. And if you have time for a few, I'll kind of push them up here for you, Deep.
Sure. And this is for students who are going to get an A+.
There you go.
All right.
And by the way, there's a lot of working professionals here, right? I mean, of course, for you and a veteran like you, we all are students, and in your eyes, we will
So am
remain
I. I
students.
think there's never a day when we cease to learn, Pinkesh. I think
Absolutely.
if anybody could
Absolutely.
claim that they are an expert, I think that's the day when the downfall begins.
Yeah, that's very, very,
Gotta keep that learning.
very humble of you to
I
say
think
that.
more than the yearning for earning, you should have the yearning for learning.
Yeah, there you go. One thing that I see, and I think Srini from GE also asked something along those lines. You mentioned something in your slide about value versus valuation,
Mhm.
and how you apply data science in different aspects. Uh, in your view, post the COVID situation, do you think the pendulum is going to swing more towards value than valuation?
True.
What is your thought there? Because there's a lot of startups right now.
I do believe,
Yeah.
I do believe that will be the case. I think there was this hype around valuation. The people were looking at speculations around what could, startups bring to the table. I think people are becoming more conscious, and the VCs and the street would expect organizations to first deliver on value, the EBITDAs, the ROCEs, which will become fundamentally important for organizations, because the market is going to treat you extremely, extremely skeptically if you don't show that, and your valuations will not see the kind of valuation that you're expected to unless you give the value. So it's almost a necessity now. Value is a necessity to a valuation, right? So you cannot command valuation without value. Gone are the days where companies were seeing massive valuation, but were still not profitable. This is the time when value becomes critical, and hence your focus on driving revenues and operational excellence becomes really important, which is where data science can come to place.
Fascinating. We've been hearing a lot of literature, a lot of buzz, talking about the fourth industrial revolution, in this world, kind of led by data. We hear the last survey I saw was 2019. The top Fortune 1000 companies, 48% of their revenues were attributed to data science. So even before COVID, this was highly in vogue, and in practice, I'm sure, with large divisions at Aditya Birla that you're driving is just another example. But I think post-COVID, you're right. I think it's going to be more about value than valuations, and it'll be very interesting to see how people innovate. Yesterday, a day before yesterday, we had a session with Shamik, who you probably know at Cult, and how they've kind of transformed and pivoted to a very simple and yet a very effective way of kind of doing energy meters and connecting that remote, Zumba class, if you will, just like your example that you mentioned. So it's already happening. What you're saying is already happening for sure. There's one other set of questions that I think a lot of people are asking right now on the LinkedIn thread, and I'd certainly encourage you to take a look at it whenever you have a moment or two to answer some questions there as well. But this whole notion of you talked about skills, and you kind of showed a nice little ladder of how you go from different analyst type of roles to kind of more leadership type of role. In your view, what are how would you hire in current context if you were to hire analyst professionals, senior data science managers? What are the three things that you would look for, and what would be your prescriptive guidance and advice to folks who want to become you eventually?
No, thanks for asking. I think some of this I touched upon in that ABCDE, but sometimes we get too enamored by just the technical acumen. I do believe that the technical acumen is important, and it is something that can also, over a period of time, build in an individual. But there are certain attributes that I do believe is absolutely fundamental, at least when I'm looking for an individual. First, as I said earlier, is the aspect of curiosity, and curiosity cannot be taught, Pinkesh. And I think curiosity is about challenging the status quo. Curiosity is about looking out and researching on what is the best way that I could bring a particular solution. Curiosity is understanding why does the kiln, or why does the logistics cost suddenly increase when I go from Bangalore to Belgaum, and stays flat when I go from Bangalore to Chennai, even though the distance is the same. So I think that's curiosity. You don't teach curiosity to anybody. To me, the learning and the curiosity are the two important aspects that is required, in
Very well
every
said.
single individual, right? If you don't show the curiosity and if you don't show the hunger to learn, the organization itself will not be able to innovate. And I alone cannot innovate. For me, it is important that I, along with every single individual that represents my organization, has the same level of innovation. And there are ideas that we are now driving across the group that has come from, a person who's been in the organization for less than a year. And this is one of the biggest ideas that we have generated in the organization. So to me, yes, the skills are important. You've got to be bilingual. You cannot be bilingual on day one. You've got to understand the business, but that'll take time. You've got to speak to an MD in the language that he or she understands, but you also have to speak to, let's say, your peers in the language that they understand, which is data science. So you've got to be bilingual.
Absolutely.
But the two faculties that is absolute must is curiosity and the desire to learn.
You bring up a very important point that has been very recently brought up in our internal community of 30,000 people when this bubbled up as the top question, Deep. And in fact, there's a poll that I'd like for the team to put up on the screen for people here on this audience today. And so let's see what the audience thinks about that question. But more importantly, I'd like to kind of get your take on this question as well. And the question goes something like this, right? What is easier, while relatively speaking, to get to that bilingual part that you talked about, right? Which one is easier to get to a data science manager role or a path? A business guy learning data science, a data scientist learning business. And of course, both are important. But in your view, in your vast experience, as you've seen people grow in their career paths, which one,
It
is
depends on
faster?
who you're asking. If you're asking me as an MD of an organization, I would love to have my business professional understand data science, then my data science person to understand business. Because I know that a data science will take years to understand the nuance of the business. But if I can make my business person understand basics of data science, which can increase the application of data science or create data democratization or data driven culture, the value that I will get out of that would be much more than the value that I would get from a data scientist understanding business. So that's one view, all right?
Fascinating.
Okay, but more importantly, which one is easier? I do believe that today it is all a function of your desire to learn. Of course, it is a technical field, but a large part of data science is also becoming, it is being platformized. For example, you've got workbenches which tell you, how do you use random forest, for example, right? How do you use logistic regression? So you don't actually need to understand the technicalities. Coding is no longer an imperative for you to build the best algorithm, as long as you understand which algorithm to use or not. Over a course of a year or 2 years of good sound learning, I'm sure a business professional can pick that up too. Eventually, we want what
Got
we
it.
call is a full stack, a person who understands the business and the data science. I just hope
Correct.
every single HR professional has a data science in him or her. Every single finance guy has a data science in her. Every single marketing professional. So that data science as a function ceases to exist. That's my hope. I don't want data science as a
Yeah.
function to exist as a silo like technology. Data science should be as embedded into the organization as somebody would say is strategy to a role. You don't say that strategy is only for a strategy guy. Strategy is there for a marketing person, for an HR person. So is the case for data science. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think, and I think I'm glad you said what you said, because quite contrary to what a lot of people think, including representative on this group, I think your point is probably more well taken, that it's easier, relatively speaking, for that business guy, or at least that's desirable for an MD to have that business guy go learn data science as opposed to the other way around. I think Ravi made some very similar comments, and Flipkart, they kind of go much deeper and let the data scientists do data scientist job rather than trying to kind of make them a multi-purpose business person. So fascinating. One of the other questions, and there's a lot of good things coming here from Shiv Prasad, from Rajarita Datta from DBS Bank, and many others. Now, Pulkit Raturi has a question, and I think he is wanting your view on which side would you take? Would you take like a pro AI, Mark Zuckerberg, side, or a cautious Elon Musk? I think it's a fascinating debate that a lot of people are having these days. But I think people are curious in the community now. Where do you stand? Where do you, which camp do you belong to, Deep?
I
And
look,
and what do you resonate more with?
yeah, if you ask a thorough data science professional, he or she would love to see that a cab driver who used to boast about understanding the nooks and corner of a Mumbai street today does not boast of that and just resorts to Google, uh, and says that, look, let Google tell me what's the most optimal route. That to me is one dimension. However, that is a dimension which works on route optimization, but does not work when it comes to surgery, or cardiosurgery. So the camps would vary depending on what is the situation at hand. To be honest, I would not take one or the other. So I would say that, look, depending on what am I looking at, it has to be done through a layer of responsible AI. It has to be done through trust. It has to be done through control. At the end of the day, consumer like choices. You got to give them choices, but the consumers also want to be in control. You give them choices, but you also give them control. What you can't tell them that I want you to watch this particular movie and no other movie. What you can go to consumers saying that, look, you can watch these 3 movies, or you can read this book on Kindle, or you can spend time. That's still fine, but we have no business in controlling consumers. So again, at this point, I would say that either of the two extremes are dangerous. We have to come to a happy medium, Pankaj.
Fascinating. Well, I'm sure this conversation can go on and on with the excited insights and the clarity and the lucidity with which I think you have explained. I think there's a lot of kudos happening on the chat. I'm seeing a lot of that on the LinkedIn thread. So we're right at the top of the hour, 3 minutes over, actually. And so with that, I wanted to again thank you a lot. For spending this time with the community. I'm sure it means a lot to people here, as well as those who will be listening to this later. By the way, we've got a couple hundred people live on YouTube streaming as well. So
That's great.
Truly appreciate Deep. It's very late for you, and I know last we spoke about you had to choose this over your tequila. So the next tequila shots are on us, and certainly look forward to having you at the campus as well.
Thank you. Look forward to, and thank you again for the opportunity. You have a great weekend.
Thanks.
And thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Back to you, Sai.
Thank you so much, Deep. Really appreciate you taking the time and providing those insights. It was very insightful and enlightening for many of us. And before we close for the day, I just wanted to announce, Bhupesh from Cummins gets the Best Question Award. Bhupesh, congratulations, and your award is on your way. I would request audience to take about 30 seconds to scan this to give later a video testimonial, to tell us what went right, what you liked, what you didn't like, right? And that way we can improve it for the next sessions and the next conferences. And Deep, thank you so much. And here is a virtual digital certificate of appreciation to you. By no means, this is enough for taking your time and giving us your insights. Thank you. And good night, all of you. Tomorrow we have an open conference day. I just wanted to remind that these are our speakers from the community, the nurture that comes together, aspiring product leaders, current product leaders in various organizations, working as data science managers and various roles. So some exciting topics. So see you tomorrow. It starts at 5:30 p.m. and hopefully you can join us tomorrow. And an amazing, exciting digital journey of your biryani. So how applied data science is now helping you getting that packet of biryani that you ordered through Swiggy up to your home. What role does data science play? So hopefully we'll see you all again. Until then, good night. And again, take few seconds to give your feedback on the poll that comes up right away.
Thank you, Sai, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Tomorrow we start a little earlier, which is at 4:30 p.m. We look forward to hosting you tomorrow. Bye. Good night.
Good night.